Chapter 719, Delusional Dumbledore.
Well, as you say, we don't have to worry about anyone else's safety, but you still haven't explained to me why you want me to heal the Dark Lord.
Snape demanded, his expression grim.
You are too impatient, Severus.
Dumbledore sighed with disappointment as he looked at Snape.
Impatient? I want you to understand that you don't have long to live. Once you're dead, who will fight the Dark Lord? Who will keep Potter safe?
Snape asked, exasperated. He could not understand how Dumbledore could remain so optimistic in such a critical situation.
So we must plan accordingly, which will require time and patience.
Dumbledore continued, soothing Snape.
Voldemort has always been very suspicious. Now that you have cured him, he will trust you more in the future.
Snape muttered mockingly to himself, thinking about how Voldemort had praised him the night before.
Or do you expect me to take the Dark Lord by surprise after gaining his trust?
If Dumbledore were alive, he would be useful as an undercover agent, but if he were dead, what good would all the effort he had put into convincing Voldemort to work for him?
No, I do not expect you to kill Tom, as you would never be able to do such a thing.
Dumbledore insisted. Snape's face twitched slightly at this.
That is why I want you to do something for me when the time is right.
Dumbledore's face grew serious, and he took an object from his drawer and placed it on the table.
Give this to him.
Snape stared at the object on the table, then quickly looked up at Dumbledore, his face full of shock and confusion, and almost wondered if Dumbledore had the wrong thing.
Are you sure you want me to give this to the Dark Lord?
Snape looked at Dumbledore as if he were suffering from severe Alzheimer's disease. What did he take the Dark Lord for? A baby in a cradle? An ignorant toddler? He might have been before, but unfortunately, the Dark Lord had grown up.
That's right. I need you to hand-deliver it to Lord Voldemort, and that's crucial.
Dumbledore nodded, looking extra grave and not at all amused. Snape looked at him for a long moment, then took the object from the table and asked,
Then can you tell me what it does? When the time is right, you and he will understand.
Dumbledore replied. Snape's brow was furrowed in displeasure at Dumbledore's cryptic words, and it took him a while to get the words out.
And how do I know when is the right time?
Dumbledore was silent for a moment, thinking of Trelawney's prophecy, and then his eyes began to shine with blue light.
After my death, if ever the day comes when Lord Voldemort is overcome with terror and panic, it will be the time.
Snape remained silent, then swiftly turned and walked away. He intended to go back and carefully study whether the potion he brewed would cause any irreversible damage to a wizard's brain, affecting one's intelligence.
Goodbye, Harry and Ron, and don't forget to worry about you during the summer.
Hermione said, looking longingly at the two of them before turning to Ivan.
Understood, I'll remember to write.
Yvonne replied before Hermione could reply. Hermione, however, shook her head and said with a smile,
I was going to say, I'd come to see you when I'm free in the summer.
Don't ever come.
Ivan protested, his scalp tingling at Hermione's intention to come to Knockoff Alley. As soon as he said it, Ivan regretted it. As he expected, Hermione's smile vanished and she scowled at him, her lips pursed.
It's not that I don't welcome you, Hermione. It's just that I'm afraid it's not very safe there this year.
Ivan threw up his hands in exasperation. The already chaotic Knockoff Alley, coupled with the effects of Lord Voldemort's return, had left him too busy to entertain Hermione.
Because of you-know-who, you're worried he's going to try to get back at you.
Hermione's mild anger vanished as the thought occurred to her, and she spoke up urgently.
What then? You could hide at Hogwarts during the summer holidays, and you-know-who wouldn't dare go there.
Harry and Ron turned to Ivan with concern. Ivan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he watched the young witch come up with a blind idea and Harry and the others agree. At this moment, a voice sounded behind them.
You don't have to go to all that trouble, Hermione. I'm sure that in a few days, Professor Dumbledore will invite you all to come to my house.
They all turned to see Sirius emerging from the passageway, leading to platform 9 3/4 with a large suitcase. Harry was delighted that he would not have to be at the Dursleys all summer and would be able to see his friends.
Then why didn't you tell us this morning?
Harry asked curiously.
Professor Dumbledore wanted me to keep it from you for a while, so that he could surprise you.
Sirius smiled, then turned to Ivan and tried to comfort him.
Ivan, when you get back, try to talk some sense into your mother and get her to let go of her prejudices. The whole wizarding world is unsafe now that you know who is back, and Knockturn Alley will only get more dangerous.
Ivan asked, puzzled.
This is not a time to be concerned about petty squabbles.
Chapter 720, Fidelius Curse. Ivan nodded at Sirius's words but did not agree and simply refused.
Thank Professor Dumbledore for his kindness, but we have other things to do this summer, so I'm afraid we won't be able to come to your house.
Ivan is well aware of how much Alicia dislikes Dumbledore and his friends, so it is difficult to imagine her with a member of the Order of the Phoenix. It must have been very awkward. Besides, there were too many things waiting for him in Knockturn Alley, which meant he could not take refuge in the Order of the Phoenix's safe house like Harry and the others. Ivan's resolute response was unexpected. Harry, Ron, and Hermione all looked at him worriedly and tried to console him. Before they could speak, Ivan intervened.
Actually, you don't have to worry about our safety.
Sirius shook his head to himself. Having fought in the battle, he could see that Ivan was no match for Lord Voldemort. Sirius did not try to persuade him otherwise, as he could guess what Ivan was referring to when he mentioned the safe house. At Ivan's insistence, Harry and the others gave up except Hermione, who stepped forward and hugged Ivan.
In that case, you must be careful during the summer holidays and remember to keep in touch with me.
The little witch said reluctantly.
Well, you too.
Yvonne smiled back. They held each other for a minute until they saw Mr. Granger walking towards them from the crowd. Moments later, Ron and Harry were picked up by Mrs. Weasley and the Dursleys. Ivan stayed where he was until he saw Alicia, who seemed to be in a hurry and looked tired.
Did something happen in Knockturn Alley?
Yvonne asked quickly.
There have been some strange wizards there lately, and I've sent someone to investigate,
Said Alicia casually. Yvonne frowned. This did not bode well.
Have you chosen the location of the safe house?
Ivan asked again.
Well, the underground fortress not far from the wizarding market is a good fit. It has 3 entrances and exits, and most importantly, it's large enough to store a lot of supplies. It also has a meeting room and a place to rest every day.
Alicia explained. After looking for several locations, she decided that the Noether family's location at the Wizarding Market was the best place to go, although there were some drawbacks to this.
That's it then, can't worry about it now.
Yvonne said they had built the safe house for refuge, not pleasure, and it was worth sacrificing some comfort. They talked their way out of the crowds and found a secluded alley where they could use apparition to return to Knockturn Alley. When Ivan returned to his senses, he was in the Wizarding Market. Unlike the noisy, chaotic scene of the past, the Wizarding Market was deserted and deserted. Ivan turned to look at Alicia, puzzled.
To facilitate your spell casting, I ordered them to stay away from here today.
Said Alicia. Ivan then realized that this was the first time he had used the Fidelius curse. It was unknown if there were any taboos, so the fewer people who disturbed him, the better. Following the route in her memory, Ivan and Alicia entered the house and turned the old oil lamp next to them, revealing a passageway. The underground fortress had obviously been decorated. There was a carpet on the floor and witch lights hung at regular intervals, illuminating the long corridors ahead. The walls were covered in intricate inscriptions, and many magical statues had been added to the entrances and corners. If intruders were detected, the fortifications would activate automatically, buying time for them to fight back or escape. Ivan listened as Alicia told him about the changes in the fortress below as they headed into the meeting room. Pushing the door open, Ivan went straight to the center of the room, where Alicia suddenly asked,
Do you want me to leave?
Well, it's better to be careful.
Ivan said hesitantly. Without further ado, Alicia turned and left. Ivan then pulled out his wand, closed his eyes, and began to recite a long, awkward incantation. The magic within him continued to surge, quickly spreading out in all directions as Ivan sensed it. Soon, the entire fortress appeared in Ivan's mind, and more than half of his magic had been consumed. This caused Ivan to worry that his choice of location would be too large, in case his magic suddenly ran out. Fortunately, after the incantation was finished, the feeling of magic being pulled away gradually stopped. Ivan breathed a sigh of relief, then opened his eyes and looked around. Everything was normal in the conference room. He had a vague feeling that something was different, but he could not say what. It was just an extra location in his mind.
Are you done?
Alicia asked Ivan as soon as he left the underground fortress. Ivan nodded, then said abruptly,
Mom, do you remember where our safe house is?
Of course it was in.
Alicia started to reply, but then she stopped and muttered to herself.
Strange, I remember it very well. I even burned a few protective runes there the other day.
The more she searched her memory, the more she couldn't remember, and even when Ivan tried to open the Chamber of Secrets in front of her, she couldn't see him, let alone walk inside. Eventually, Alicia begins to question the existence of the safe house.
I guess the spell worked better than I thought it would.
Ivan said, sounding pleased. Alicia gave him an angry look.
Tell me, where exactly is that place?
The safe house is located in the underground fortress of the Wizarding Market in Knockoff Alley, right in front of you.
Chapter 721, Morning at Knockoff Alley. Alicia almost thought Ivan was going to try to fool her again, but then she followed his finger and saw that a narrow passageway had been created in the flat wall. More importantly, her previously hazy memory was becoming clearer.
That's some magic.
She exclaimed. The tunnel had been right in front of her the whole time, but she hadn't noticed.
If it's not magical, there's no way to hide it from you-know-who.
Ivan began.
Have you decided what we should do next? Who are you going to let into this safe house?
Alicia asked. Ivan hesitated for a moment, then said,
Let's get some rest today. I'll get everyone together for a meeting tomorrow morning.
You're going to tell everyone where the safe house is.
Alicia asked, frowning at Ivan's ineptitude. Although these wizards were usually very obedient, it was hard to predict what they were thinking.
I know some people are not always reliable, and that is why we need to get rid of the unstable elements as soon as possible.
Ivan explained. However, Ivan's words only served to further confuse Alicia. Even if they gathered everyone together, how were they going to confirm who was suspicious? Yvonne did not wait for Alicia to ask.
Of course, I have an idea.
She said confidently.
It would be so much easier if they were all there.
Isaiah looked at Ivan suspiciously. She had said nothing, but twice Ivan had guessed what she was going to say and given her an answer.
Telepathy, you were reading my mind.
Ivan's reaction was so obvious that it didn't take long for Alicia to understand what was going on. She reached out and pinched Ivan's cheek.
What a nasty bit of magic.
Sometimes it works, though, doesn't it?
Ivan said, grimacing.
I can't deny that. By the way, when did you learn to do this?
Alicia asked Ivan curiously. Legilimency was an extremely special spell that usually required one to have the necessary talent to master it. Therefore, there were very few legiliments in the entire wizarding world, and only a few well-known ones. Therefore, under normal circumstances, no wizard would deliberately guard against this.
At Hogwarts, of course,
Said Ivan, rubbing his sore cheek. Alicia did not ask any questions, but repeatedly ordered Ivan not to read her mind. Ivan nodded and assured her. He was well aware of how annoying Legilimers were, so he would not read the minds of his family and friends unless they agreed to do so. And this particular offense was just to show Alicia what he could do.
Since you're planning to meet up with Duget and the others again tomorrow, we can all get together tonight.
Alicia said with a smile. Ivan, of course, would not refuse, as he had been so busy dealing with Knockoff Alley that he and his mother had had very little time alone together. Not to mention the fact that he had to put on an act in front of the dark wizards, which was why he did not immediately summon them. After re-entering the underground fortress, Isaiah asked Ivan to sit in the living room, then went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. She had not cooked for a year, as Dobby the house elf was in charge. Fortunately, Alicia had moved her magical kitchenware to the house, so her skills did not deteriorate. They ate and talked, tacitly avoiding all the annoying topics except the interesting and enjoyable ones. It was not until late at night, when Ivan went out to call Dobby, that he became the third creature to know the location of the safe house. It's too big a place to live without house elves.
Sorry.
Early the next morning, Ivan was woken by a soft cry. When Ivan opened his eyes, he was in darkness except for a pair of large, round eyes resting on the edge of the bed. Ivan snapped his fingers and the room lit up, revealing Dobby standing by his bed.
Is it morning already?
Ivan asked, finding it inconvenient to live underground when one could not tell the approximate time by the sky.
It's 10 o'clock. The mistress asked me to call you.
Dobby squeaked. Ivan immediately got out of bed, washed up, and went to the living room where Alicia was waiting.
Why are you up so late? Did you not sleep well last night?
Alicia asked with concern.
No, I slept very well.
Ivan grabbed a sandwich from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. He then looked at Alicia and asked vaguely,
Where are Dugat and the others?
I've asked Walker to inform them. They should be here any minute now.
said Alicia, looking at the clock on the wall.
Are you going to pick them up yourself?
Asked Alicia. Ivan shook her head. It would be demeaning. After swallowing the food in his mouth, Ivan asked Dobby to get a piece of parchment and write down the location of the underground fortress.
Show them this and they can come in, but remember to burn the note after you've read it.
Chapter 722, We're All Trustworthy People. In Knockturn Alley, in the square outside the wizarding market, a large group of wizards were gathered anxiously, whispering to each other. At the corner of the square, Rosier pulled Avery aside and whispered in a frightened voice.
Avery, are you sure that man is really back? Of course, I saw the Dark Lord with my own eyes, and I'm sure you've heard the news. If you want to live, you'd better consider my offer.
Avery sneered. Rosier's expression changed several times, but he remained hesitant and did not reply. Avery looked at Rosier and saw that he was wavering, so he continued to try to talk him out of it.
I must warn you, Rosier, the master does not have the patience.
You know who would be so kind as to help us get the wizarding market back?
Roselle was incredulous.
What about the price? What do we have to pay?
Rosier was not going to risk everything and end up with nothing.
Do you think the master will care about a small wizarding market? If we are loyal when the plan succeeds, we can take back everything we've lost. Or even better, take control of Knockturn Alley.
Avery said confidently. Rosier hesitated, caught in a battle of wills, although Ivan's magic had frightened him enough to fully acknowledge his potential. However, the news of the Dark Lord's return was so shocking that Rosier found it difficult to decide. Seeing that Rosier was slow to make a decision, Avery grew increasingly impatient. However, just as he was about to strike while the iron was hot and try to persuade her again, Alicia came out of the wizarding market regulation room. Avery immediately stopped talking and the noise quickly died down. Dugat strode forward and asked anxiously.
Althea, has Lord Harles returned?
Yes, he's expecting to see you.
Said Alicia, glancing at Doggett and then looking at Rosier and the others.
Come with me.
Doggett and the others looked at each other and followed. Alicia led the group into an empty room, which was soon filled to the brim with 30 people. Having received the news beforehand, Fran and the others stayed at the back of the group, vaguely blocking the entrance to the room. Avery, acutely aware of this, was deeply disturbed and forced himself to remain calm as he asked.
Where is Lord Harles? There is nothing here. Why have you brought us here, Alicia?
The wizarding market was originally built by pure-blood families like them, so Avery was well aware of the layout of the regulation chamber. There was nothing special about the place, and it was too cramped to be a place for a meeting. Instead, it was like a cage, where the prisoners and the werewolves were the prison guards. Avery was not the only one who was uncomfortable with this, as many wizards looked at Alicia with displeasure, awaiting her explanation.
Hold your horses, Avery. This time you're going somewhere private, so I'm going to have to be a bit more careful.
Alicia began to explain, then pulled out another piece of parchment and handed it to Doggett.
You can all pass it on to each other.
Doggett examined the parchment for a moment, then understood what it was and handed it to Gleason. This went on, and soon the parchment was in Avery's hand. He looked at it curiously. The battle command is located in the underground fortress of the Wizarding Market in Knockoff Alley. The moment he saw these words, his previously blocked memories immediately surfaced in his mind. Avery was stunned for a moment, and then a chill ran down his spine, and he almost thought that someone had tampered with his memory. It did not take him long to remember that he had read about a spell in his family's library that could explain such an eerie situation. Avery looked down at the parchment in his hand again and immediately determined that this was the effect of the Fidelius charm. It was a powerful and ancient magic that could hide a secret in the soul of a living person, usually to hide something extremely precious or to create a safe house from enemies.
You haven't finished yet, Avery.
Alicia asked coldly, watching Avery's every move. Hearing this, Avery's expression turned serious, and he passed the parchment to another wizard. He said with emotion,
After reading it, I recalled some things. I didn't expect Sir Harles to trust us enough to be willing to tell us such an important location.
But of course, as we are all standing here, we are all trustworthy people.
Chapter 723, That Man is More Terrifying Than Before. Acacia kept an eye on the changing expressions on the faces of the crowd, committing them to memory, then went to the mahogany table and turned the oil lamp on it. The wall shook and cracked, and a large number of stone bricks sank into the ground. A narrow passageway was soon revealed.
Now that you've read the note, come on in.
Alicia said to the wizards and led the way into the tunnel. On the way to the conference room, Acacia explained the principles of the Fidelius charm and the things to take note of to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings.
I can't believe there's such a thing as magic.
Said Grace.
No wonder, I don't remember being here before.
It was also the first time that most of the wizards present had heard of the Fidelius charm, and they discussed its magical effects in private. Avery, Rosier, and the others did not participate in the discussion, feeling a sense of superiority. They had long recognized this as the Fidelius charm. Such high-end magic could only be understood by pureblood wizards with extraordinary knowledge.
Long time no see, everyone.
In the silence that followed, Ivan finally spoke. His dark eyes scanned the room, then he nodded and continued.
Good, no one was absent this time, and I thought some of you were afraid to come to the party.
As soon as he finished speaking, Ivan could clearly feel a portion of the wizarding mood swings becoming more intense. Although none of the wizards present dared to look him in the eye, Ivan used his dragon's might to intimidate and his mystique in order to break through their defenses and inflate their emotions. It seemed to be working. Even with her eyes closed, Ivan could clearly sense the tension, fear, and regret that were escaping from some people's minds. After about half a minute of silence, Walker couldn't help but ask,
Sir Harles, is there something important that you need us for?
He couldn't stand the oppressive atmosphere.
There is an important matter.
Ivan agreed, then changed his tone.
But before that, I must make an announcement. 15 years ago, the Dark Lord Voldemort, feared and feared by all in the wizarding world, returned.
Perhaps because Ivan's news was so shocking, the quiet conference room became noisy.
Sir Harles, are you sure it's true? You know who must have died over a decade ago at the hands of Harry Potter.
Joseph quavered.
He's not dead, Joseph. He never was.
Ivan explained pleasantly.
That coward feared death more than any of us, so he used dark magic to keep himself alive in the face of certain death.
Hearing this, everyone present felt a chill run down their spines. It was difficult for them to imagine what kind of dark magic was powerful enough to avoid death.
Believe me, no one can avoid death easily, not even the Dark Lord. If you could see him like that, you would never have such a deep fear of him. Over the years, I have had several encounters with Lord Voldemort, when the Dark Lord lost his powers and became a pathetic ghost, unable to perform magic as well as a noisy gnome.
Chapter 724, A Few Traitors Among Us. As Ivan spoke, Joseph and the others bowed their heads in fear. No one dared to fabricate such a powerful Dark Lord as Ivan did. Ivan, who had been using legilimency the whole time, could clearly sense the fear in everyone, and he frowned. It seems that the influence of Lord Voldemort was so great that his few words were not enough to change their minds. Even so, Ivan did not regret announcing Voldemort's return, as he knew that it could not be kept a secret. He would rather be the one to reveal the truth than wait for them to find out from other sources. With this in mind, Ivan lost all inhibitions and continued speaking.
Now that Lord Voldemort has used certain means to regain his powers, there is little doubt that some of you have received word of this in advance.
Ivan looked around the room, his eyes resting briefly on the faces of the purebloods before settling on Doggett.
I don't suppose I'm wrong, do I, Doggett? Don't you want to talk about it?
Everyone's eyes turned in the same direction. Doggett was silent for a while, then he sighed and pulled open his left sleeve in front of everyone, revealing the strange dark mark on his wrist. A few months ago, the dark mark became more prominent, a sign of the Dark Lord's growing power. 4 days ago, when this was at its height, the dark mark suddenly became very hot.
I've never heard you speak of this before, Doggett.
Alicia challenged him, looking at him sharply.
I could not be certain of that until today, so I was going to wait for Lord Harles to return and discuss it with you.
Doggett explained with a casual expression. After a pause, Doggett continued, perhaps thinking this was not good enough.
On that occasion, I did not answer the Dark Lord's call. A loser who stirs up chaos through fear is not worth following.
Yvonne stared at Doggett appraisingly. He certainly knew that she was hiding the fact that Lord Voldemort had come back to life for more than just a few reasons. However, Doggett's thoughts were still within his tolerable limits, so Ivan had no intention of exposing him.
A wise choice. To side with the remnants of an old age would be to seek your own destruction.
Doggett's relief was evident, and the atmosphere seemed to ease, but Ivan's next words quickly caused some hearts to leap into their throats.
It's just a pity that not everyone is as clear-minded and able to make the right decision as you.
Ivan said, looking around at the crowd with a tone of disappointment.
We have a few traitors among us, who may have been in the power of the Dark Lord, or who may have been promised something, but in short, they have turned their backs on us.
When Ivan finished speaking, the crowd looked around for the traitors, and soon began to question each other due to the various contradictions.
5 seconds, and I'll give these people a chance to repent.
Yvonne interrupted. The room fell silent again. Avery, hiding in the crowd, was so caught up in the battle that he almost stepped forward when Ivan said it. However, reason told him that Ivan would never be so kind as to forgive such traitors. All of this was most likely part of a plot to lure the betrayers out of hiding, and Avery suspected that Yvonne had no idea who the betrayers were, but had received information that she was deliberately trying to blow them up. Therefore, as long as he could stabilize himself, there was a high chance that he would be able to escape this calamity. Avery kept comforting himself, hiding in the crowd and saying nothing. 5 seconds passed in the blink of an eye, and Ivan's voice shattered the illusion.
Avery, I'm disappointed in you. I thought you'd at least have the courage to come forward.
Yvonne sneered. Under Ivan's watchful eye, the wizards gathered there spontaneously moved away, exposing Avery's hiding place. Avery's heart skipped a beat when he heard his name, but he managed to keep his face calm as he tried to defend himself.
Sir Harles, I'm afraid you've misunderstood.
Yvonne did not wait for him to finish.
You didn't think I wouldn't see you that night, did you, Avery?
Ivan had no interest in listening to Avery's excuses. Avery's mind, as defenseless as a sieve, was revealing everything he was thinking. Not to mention, he saw the faces of most of the Death Eaters in Winky's memories before leaving school, including Avery's.
Sir Harles, please believe me when I say that I was forced to do this by the Dark Lord. No, the Dark Lord. He tortured me relentlessly with the Cruciatus Curse, destroying my will and forcing me to divulge information about Knockoff Alley to him, or else.
Ivan said in a genial tone, rising to his feet.
But I'm more or less curious as to how Voldemort tortured you.
Ivan asked, turning to Avery, who was kneeling beside him. He waved his wand without warning, and his voice became cold.
Cusio heart-wrenching.
Ah, Avery screamed in pain, as if someone had ripped off a piece of his flesh with their bare hands. Avery was thrashing around on the floor, tears and snot pouring out of his eyes. After what seemed like an eternity, the torture finally ended, and Avery slumped to the ground, twitching like a dead fish. His lifeless eyes were blank, as if he could not understand why Ivan would suddenly attack him.
I gave you a second chance, but you lied to me again.
Ivan said coldly, looking at Avery.
That's not what I was told.
Chapter 725, Loyalty to Rosier. Ivan spoke as he read the memories that came to mind.
I have been told that you fell on your knees at Voldemort's feet of your own accord in exchange for information from Knockoff Alley so that he would not punish you. Is that correct, Avery? Unfortunately, Voldemort will not spare a former traitor so easily, so he orders you to return to me, gather information, recruit more wizards from Knockoff Alley, and make them Death Eaters.
Ivan's words were sharp, each one like a hammer blow to Avery's heart. Avery, who was lying on the ground, trembled uncontrollably. He looked at the young wizard in front of him in horror, wondering where he had heard this news from. However, there were only a few Death Eaters present that day, and each of them was someone the Dark Lord approved of and trusted.
You think this is secret enough to fool me? Avery, you may not know this, but once a third person knows something, it is no longer a secret.
Ivan scoffed. Avery's face fell, and when it was confirmed that one of the Death Eaters must have sold him out.
Does anyone else have anything to say besides Avery? Do you want to come forward, or do you want me to say your names one by one?
Yvonne asked. After a short silence, 3 wizards stepped forward, trembling, and to everyone's surprise, one of them was a werewolf.
Carter, I can't believe you betrayed us as well.
Flan scolded the werewolf wizard who had stepped forward. He couldn't understand why a fellow werewolf would choose to betray them. Ivan had never mistreated them. Not only did he trust them and give them stable, high-paying jobs, but he also developed and improved the wolfsbane potion so that they could live a normal life. Carter's betrayal was akin to biting the hand that fed him. If Ivan hadn't spoken, Flan would have killed him. Walker and the others also stared at the werewolf wizard with disdain and resentment, worried that Ivan would be suspicious of them over this incident. Under the knife-sharp gaze of the werewolf wizards, Carter stumbled to his knees and crawled like Avery to Ivan, begging for his forgiveness. The other 2 wizards pointed angrily at Avery, stating that they had been bewitched and had made the wrong choice. Ivan sat back in his seat, not bothering to listen to their excuses. He had already given them a chance, but they didn't appreciate it. It was too late for regrets. While Ivan remained silent, the wizards continued to search for the last betrayer. They all agreed that since Lord Hales had removed 5 chairs, there could be no mistake. In the crowd, Rosier was visibly agitated, as he could not be certain that the chair that had been taken from him was the one that had been taken from him. Because Avery had come to him last night, and while he had hesitated to agree to it at the time, it was not technically an act of betrayal.
Sir Harles, Avery asked me to join the Dark Lord as a Death Eater last night, and he told me that they would help me regain control of the wizarding market if I would join the Dark Lord.
As soon as he opened his mouth, Rosier regurgitated everything that had happened, not daring to hold anything back. He knew very well that if Ivan sent someone to interrogate Avery, none of this would be hidden.
So you're just going to go along with it?
Said Alicia fiercely, glaring at Rosier. Rosier shook his head frantically and explained.
No, it did not, and I firmly refused Avery's offer, advising him to think very carefully about the consequences of betraying Lord Harles.
Avery managed to get to his feet. He glared at Rosier, interrupting him.
You told me the other day that you were going to carefully consider my opinion and give me an answer the next day.
What a joke. I said that on purpose to confuse you so that I could gather evidence and inform Sir Harles at today's meeting.
Roselle said righteously, then turned to Yvonne, trying to please her.
It's just that I didn't think Sir Harles would have known and seen through you before I did.
Chapter 726, Ivan, this is a win-win measure. Rosier went on, trying his best to excuse himself and compliment Ivan. However, under his watchful eye, Ivan's reaction was very calm. He just stared at him in silence, his dark eyes seeming to see through everything. Rosier's voice trailed off and he stopped, looking embarrassed.
I don't want there to be a next time, understand?
Ivan said, putting his wand away. Rosier nodded frantically, feeling a lingering fear. He was secretly glad that he had taken the initiative to stand up and sincerely admit his mistake. Now that he was exempted from punishment, the last seat had indeed been reserved for him. However, Rosier did not know that he was thinking too much. Prior to the meeting, Avery was the only betrayer Ivan was able to identify, and the only reason he removed 5 seats was to lure out more potential enemies.
Why 5?
Because setting up too many empty seats could cause panic, and could even lead Avery and the others to think they had the numbers and fight back. If it was too little, it wouldn't have any effect, so 5 seemed just right to Ivan. He didn't expect it to actually work.
Take them away and lock them up. I still lack some experimental subjects for my magical experiments.
Ivan was not prepared to send these traitors to their deaths with a few bolts of Avada Kedavra, as that would be too cruel, and too much killing and unrestrained unleashing of dark magic might affect his mind. Therefore, it was better to recycle them and use them as experimental subjects for practicing magic or developing potions. It was a win-win move to show off one's humanity and make full use of resources to quickly improve one's magic. Unfortunately, the wizards who were dragged away did not think so. When they heard that Ivan was going to use them as guinea pigs, their faces turned ashen. Rosier and the others who were watching the fight looked at Avery and the others with pity. It is clear to all present that their leader, Ivan Howells, has been conducting some particularly brutal magical experiments since last year. The prisoners were usually alive and kicking when they were summoned, but when they came out of their rooms, they became listless and fearful. From the outside, no one was injured, but they all lost their memories of that time. Therefore, there was speculation that Ivan Howells was working on a soul-destroying dark art, which necessitated such strict secrecy. As a result, there were often prisoners who could not withstand the mental pressure after learning the
Truth.
and chose to end their lives early in prison.
Consumed.
Especially quickly, it turned out that it was all a misunderstanding.
How have it?
Yvonne was lost in her thoughts when a peal of laughter filled the silent meeting room. Curious, she followed the sound and was surprised to find it was Avery, who had been dragged to the door.
Shut up.
Flan, who was holding Avery by the collar, was annoyed and punched him hard in the stomach.
Let him go first, Flun.
Ivan said with interest, wondering how Avery could still laugh. Flunyon released his grip, and Avery fell to the ground, clutching his stomach, glaring at everyone in the room.
You won't be happy for long. Knockoff Alley is the master's next target. The Dark Lord will not let you go.
Avery turned his attention back to Ivan, speaking through gritted teeth.
This time you will not be so lucky as to escape from your master.
Avery's words caused a stir in the crowd, not only because of the threat posed by the Dark Lord, but also because of the message contained within them.
What? You haven't told them what happened that night?
Avery asked sarcastically. He witnessed Ivan fleeing from the Dark Lord in the graveyard, which was why he eventually decided to sell out and join the Dark Lord. As soon as he said this, Avery was prepared to provoke Ivan into murder. Death is sometimes a relief, as it at least means that one does not have to suffer for a long time. However, to Avery's surprise, Ivan looked calm and did not seem to be affected by his words.
What do you want me to talk about, Avery? About the Dark Lord's exploits?
I don't want there to be a next time, understand? Ivan said, putting his wand away. Rosier nodded frantically, feeling a lingering fear. He was secretly glad that he had taken the initiative to stand up and sincerely admit his mistake. Now that he was exempted from punishment, the last seat had indeed been reserved for him. However, Rosier did not know that he was thinking too much. Prior to the meeting, Avery was the only betrayer Ivan was able to identify, and the only reason he removed 5 seats was to lure out more potential enemies. Why 5s? Because setting up too many empty seats could cause panic, and could even lead Avery and the others to think they had the numbers and fight back. If it was too little, it wouldn't have any effect, so 5 seemed just right to Ivan. He didn't expect it to actually work.
Or do you want me to paraphrase how the Dark Lord nearly killed himself after I rescued Harry Potter?
Chapter 727, The Dark Lord is Invincible. Ivan's unusually sharp words soon stunned Avery, who could not believe his own words.
That's impossible.
Avery shouted, his face twisted with madness as he struggled to get to her. However, Flynn was always on guard. As soon as Avery moved, she grabbed him by the back of his collar, kicked him to the ground, and forced him to the floor. Avery twisted and turned, trying to get out of Furlan's grip, but to no avail. In the end, he managed to prop his head up and glare at Ivan.
You must be lying to me. The Dark Lord is unbeatable. He is more powerful than any living wizard. You were only lucky to escape from his master. I saw with my own eyes how you managed to escape.
Ivan said, shaking his head at Avery with a sigh.
Think about it, Avery.
Under Ivan's questioning, Avery's heart sank and his memory returned. As Ivan pointed out, the Dark Lord never returned to the graveyard after he went after Harry Potter several nights ago, but merely gave them instructions via the Dark Mark to temporarily disband and leave the place. He did not see the Dark Lord again for the next few days, as Voldemort's instructions were delivered via Severus Snape.
He was too badly injured to see you in person, of course.
Ivan continued mockingly, reading Avery's mind.
Voldemort did not want you to know that the so-called Dark Lord was nothing more than a powerful wizard. He could be injured or killed, just like everyone else.
Hearing this, Avery began to tremble. He could not believe it, but all the evidence pointed to the fact that the Dark Lord had been defeated.
Impossible!
The watching wizards felt a chill run down their spines, and their fear of Ivan deepened. They had heard every word of Ivan's conversation with Avery, and even the stupidest of them could see that their leader, Lord Harles, had exchanged blows with the Dark Lord. The details of the battle are unknown, but one thing is certain. Lord Voldemort was badly injured and forced into hiding, and Ivan is still standing there unharmed. It is obvious who will win.
Drag him away!
Ivan shouted, losing interest in Avery when he saw he was losing his mind.
Yes, Sir Harles.
Flan said respectfully, then dragged Avery off by his heels. It was only then that Ivan turned to the room and gestured with his hand, saying,
Sit down, everyone. Now we can get down to business.
Ivan's gentle tone lightened the oppressive atmosphere, and the assembled wizards sat down in their chairs in relief. Doggett and Alicia sat on Ivan's left and right hands respectively, and the other wizards were subconsciously divided between the two. On the left were the purebloods and Doggett's friends, while the poor wizards and werewolves from Knockturn Alley sat on the right. It is worth noting that the seat next to Alicia was empty, as no one dared to take it, presumably reserved for Flen. Ivan did not interfere. He silently observed the situation and then asked about what had happened in Knockturn Alley while he was away. Alicia made no attempt to hide anything from him, telling him everything in detail, with Dugat adding to the details. Overall, Knockturn Alley was relatively peaceful during the year, and the wizarding market was managed to return to business, greatly alleviating the lack of funds. Training was also carried out daily, and now 60% of the wizards and witches had mastered the shield charm, increasing the number of law enforcement officers to over 20.
Even a Ministry of Magic smasher would be no match for the regulators in a one-on-one fight. Even an Auror with twice as many groups could put up a fight,
said Doggett proudly. There was nothing patronizing in his words. Although the regulators had only been trained for a year or so, their daily training was several times more intense than that of the ministry's hitters, not to mention the fact that they had good foundations and were all winners of the dueling ground. If he could recruit more men, he was confident that he could take on the ministry head-on.
Good, you've done well.
Yvonne said admiringly, looking at each of the enforcers. Each and every one of the enforcers puffed out their chests as if they were soldiers being inspected. When Ivan said this, they all felt that their hard work had been worth it. Walker boldly asked,
Sir Harles, we've been waiting for a whole year. When will there be a big operation?
The assembled wizards looked expectantly at Ivan. They had nothing to do for the past year except patrol, train, and gather information.
Since you can't wait any longer, why don't we set it for tonight?
Yvonne asked, turning to Duggart.
How many wizards were there in the whole Nocturne Alley? There are around 160 people who have been here for a long time, apart from us.
Doggett hesitated before replying. Yvonne thought about the conditions for the system's mission, rectifying Nocturne Alley, and quickly came to a decision.
What you need to do tonight is to bring everyone from Nocturne Alley to the Wizard Market. I have a few words to say.
Chapter 728, 1 year has arrived.
All of them?
Doggett stared at Ivan in astonishment.
What, you can't do it?
Ivan demanded, raising his eyebrows.
No, of course not.
Doggett shook his head. It was a difficult task, but with the right timing, a late-night raid, and a bit of luck, no one escaped.
Good, keep an eye out for the others. They're all Death Eaters, so be careful when you capture them. Don't give them a chance to fight back.
Ivan tapped his wand on the table as he spoke. Under the influence of transfiguration, several human faces appeared on the mahogany table, vivid and haunting. Doggett stared at them for a while, then promised to capture all of them tonight. The meeting went on for over an hour, and Ivan finally called it a day after the battle plan had been formulated and the exact time of the strike. The wizards in the room rose and saluted Ivan respectfully before leaving their seats in an orderly fashion. When the last wizard stepped out of the meeting room, the room, which had been dim, suddenly became much brighter. Ivan, who was sitting at the head of the table, no longer put on an act. His tense expression immediately relaxed, and he leaned back in his soft chair, looking very dispirited.
What a pain in the neck.
Ivan muttered to himself, rubbing his stiff face. If he could, he would rather spend his summers relaxing at home, reading and practicing his magic, than organizing a meeting of dark wizards to discuss how to fix Nocturne Alley. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Lord Voldemort returned threw Ivan's plans into chaos, and the peaceful atmosphere in Nocturne Alley became chaotic. In order to get rid of the instability in Nocturne Alley and gain enough power to protect himself, he had to consider completing the missions the system had given him to gain more legend points. Crucially, these few days were his last chance to complete his mission. According to Avery's information, the Dark Lord intended to recruit people and expand his influence in Nocturne Alley. Once the other party really got involved, he would never be able to complete his task of tidying up Nocturne Alley. Therefore, the only thing they could do now was to cut the Gordian knot and get rid of all the opposition in the Nocturne Alley, while Voldemort was still seriously injured and in hiding.
Send out the list, Fran.
Ivan ordered. Flun acknowledged this and distributed the parchments she was clutching to each of them. Grace took her copy and looked at it curiously. The parchment showed a map of Nocturne Alley, accurately circled with 5 locations and the names of several people. Grace immediately understood that they were her targets for the night.
Wait!
Walker asked curiously, looking at the map in his hand and then at Grace's.
You don't say. It means we're all in tonight.
Grace rolled her eyes and scanned the parchment for a sign that read.
7.
As Grace had expected, Ivan started explaining when everyone had the map in their hands. Considering that the wizards in Nocturne Alley were not friendly, and that there was a risk of accidents if they went alone, he planned to split the 46 wizards into groups of 2 to 4 so that they could work together for the night. This ensured efficiency and minimized danger.
Remember, you have to move fast.
Ivan said sternly, looking around at the crowd.
If you start a fight and make a noise, other wizards will notice, so time is of the essence. I want everyone on the list here by dawn.
Chapter 729. Is it really proper for you to invite people like this? Due to the lack of time, Ivan did not discuss the details of the battle at length. After a brief reminder, he looked around at the crowd, indicating that they were ready to go. The wizards gathered in the square immediately sprang into action. After establishing their teams and goals, they all used apparition and disappeared. The whole process was efficient and fast, taking less than half a minute, and Ivan nodded to himself as he watched. These wizards did indeed improve from a year ago, becoming less of a patchwork army and more organized and disciplined. It seemed that Alicia had trained them well over the year, and it was no wonder that Doggett was so confident that the regulators would be able to take on an Auror with twice the number of them. With this in mind, Ivan was suddenly struck by the enormity of his power, second only to the Ministry of Magic, and perhaps even to the recently rebuilt Death Eaters and Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix. Unfortunately, the wizarding world is different from the Muggle world, in that individual spellcasting ability can directly determine the outcome of a small battle. Ivan did not forget what Doggett told him about the Ministry of Magic's operation to kill Lord Voldemort during the last Wizarding War. Every one of them was an elite who had been honed by the Wizarding War. However, even this resistance was defeated by Voldemort. Due to the lack of survivors, no one knew if Voldemort alone was responsible for the battle or if someone had leaked the information, and Voldemort had used the information to his advantage, gathering his servants for a counter-encirclement operation.
Yes, this should be the place. According to our information, the wizard we're going to invite is living alone, with no one else in the house. He's average in strength and the easiest of all the targets.
Grace said enthusiastically, looking at the map in her hand.
But how do we invite him? Just knock and ask.
Walker asked, scratching his head in confusion. The smile froze on Grace's face. She hadn't thought about it until Walker brought it up. In the middle of the night, no one would be likely to say yes to a sudden invitation to go somewhere.
Anyway, let's play it safe and try it out. What if he's easy to talk to?
Walker was worried about alerting them to his presence and allowing them to escape, but he didn't want to attack them directly.
What people?
Grace felt her spirits lift and she spoke carefully.
Well, sir, we are loin forcers at the Wizarding Market, and Lord Harles kindly invites you to meet him there at once.
Grace's words seemed to make the wizard inside breathe a sigh of relief, but his tone soon became irritated and impatient.
I'm not interested.
Walker's face darkened and Grace bristled. However, they knew that it was rude to disturb someone's sleep in the middle of the night, so they tried to persuade him otherwise. However, just as they were about to speak, there was a spatial fluctuation behind them. Gripping her wand, Grace turned her head warily, but her tense expression quickly relaxed when she saw 3 enforcers apparating with an unconscious wizard over Joseph's shoulder.
Grace Walker, you haven't finished yet.
Joseph asked, looking at them in surprise.
Joseph, what are you doing here?
Walker asked in surprise. It seemed unlikely that the goals of every team would coincide.
He.
Joseph pointed at the unconscious wizard on his shoulder and laughed. Walker and Grace were both confused. From what they had been told, the owner of the room was a wizard who lived alone. The faint sound of their voices drifted into the small room, and a riot broke out.
Go, don't let them get away.
Sensing this, Joseph did not hesitate. He waved his wand and used the opening charm to break the lock, then rushed in with the wizard on his shoulder. The other 2 enforcers were also very decisive. Without a word, they followed Joseph into the house. The next moment, loud shouts and sounds of fighting came from inside the house. Walker and Grace hurried to catch up, and within moments the battle was over. When the 2 of them entered the house, it was a mess. In addition to Joseph and the others, there were a man and a woman on the ground. They looked disheveled, as if they had just put on their clothes but were already unconscious. Joseph was telling a law enforcement officer to bring the unconscious witch along when he turned to look at the 2 people who had just walked in. He enthusiastically stepped forward and patted Walker on the shoulder.
Don't worry, I won't steal your credit. I've already caught this person for you. You're welcome.
Looking at the unconscious wizard, Walker and Grace stared at each other. If they remembered correctly, Harles had told them to
invite.
Chapter 730, Open the Door, the Community Delivers Warmth. A minute later, they came out of the house with their targets on their shoulders. Due to the urgency of the mission and the other targets, Joseph and the others did not stay long. After exchanging information with Walker and Grace, they disapparated.
It seems we can't delay any longer.
Grace muttered to herself, still rooted to the spot. Earlier, she had learned from Joseph that the fastest teams had already invited 3 or 4 targets, and they had only managed to get 1.
Yes, we must hurry as well.
Walker agreed, nodding. He did not want to be the last to complete the task. The highly motivated pair retrieved their maps and used apparition to head to their next target. In another room, 10 feet away, Vincent slowly lowered the curtain after being woken up by the noise of a door being opened. While he was angry at the fact that these people were fighting at night and affecting his sleep, Vincent was secretly gloating, wondering what the unlucky man next door had done to attract so much attention.
But what does that have to do with me?
Vincent muttered to himself. After thinking for a moment, he gave up the urge to probe further. There were too many similar incidents in Knockturn Alley. Many wizards and witches had to hide in Knockturn Alley because of their criminal records or because they had offended someone. It was normal for them to be caught one day. Vincent yawned and went back to sleep. Sometime later, Vincent heard a dull knock on the door, accompanied by the rough voices of several large men.
Open the door, community warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being invited to this important gathering.
The law enforcement officers who were watching the fight clapped their hands, while the captured wizards frowned and looked coldly at Ivan. Vincent's pent-up anger only served to add insult to injury.
By invitation, do you mean sending someone into our house to knock someone out and bring them here?
Ivan was not offended by Vincent's sudden interjection, and instead explained politely.
Please forgive the law enforcement officers for their lack of manners. Due to the suddenness of the incident, special measures are usually taken in order to successfully invite everyone over, lest.
As Ivan spoke, his gaze turned slightly to the right, where Winky remembered the Death Eaters being tied up and thrown under the platform, looking very miserable.
Then why did Sir Harles go to so much trouble to invite us here?
Ivan looked around at the audience and said calmly,
Now that all the wizards in Knockturn Alley are here, we have invited you here to discuss the future of Knockturn Alley.
The future of Knockturn Alley. There were looks of derision and disdain from the assembled wizards, but Ivan ignored them and continued.
I have heard it said that Knockturn Alley is a place of refuge for the poor, and some believe it to be a concentration camp for villains and dark wizards. But in any case, chaos and murder have been the order of the town since the beginning of Knockturn Alley, and I am sure that none of you will disagree.
Ivan paused and turned to Vincent.
Vincent, if I remember correctly, your wife was killed in a Knockturn Alley brawl 3 years ago.
It seems we can't delay any longer.
Although you have successfully avenged her death, there is no going back from the dead, and I doubt that was the outcome you wanted.
Vincent's expression darkened. Ivan's words had opened a long-buried wound in his heart.
Mark, I hear you almost lost your baby to someone, and you almost died at home. What are you trying to say?
Mark's face darkened. He would have attacked her if he didn't have his wand and the spellcasters watching.
That's a good question,
Ivan said, looking around at the assembled wizards.
I think Knockturn Alley has been in chaos for too long. It needs a whole new order.
Chapter 731, My friends, it's time to make a change.
I know there are low-life thieves among you, vicious thugs, dark wizards who have mastered forbidden magic to the exclusion of the rest of the world. You have adapted so well to this place that you have actively created chaos and pleasure.
Ivan's tone became more and more high-spirited. He looked at the moved faces in the audience and spoke again.
So,
I know there are low-life thieves among you, vicious thugs, dark wizards who have mastered forbidden magic to the exclusion of the rest of the world. You have adapted so well to this place that you have actively created chaos and pleasure.
if the Ministry of Magic can't control this place, who the hell are you?
Ivan's speech came to a halt, and he turned to see a middle-aged wizard in his mid-30s speaking to him.
That's a good question. It's just that I don't like people interrupting me when I'm talking, understand?
Yvonne's smile did not waver. She was as polite as ever. The watching enforcers could not help but shiver. The middle-aged wizard was the only one to show any sign of disdain, regarding Ivan's reaction as a sign of cowardice and fear.
Crucio heart-wrenching.
An indescribable pain swept through his body, and the middle-aged wizard, who had been full of malice, fell to the ground in the next second. His body twisted crazily, his nails digging into his palms, and he let out shrill cries.
Anyone else want to ask questions?
Ivan spoke again. No one dared to respond, and everyone bowed their heads in fear. The wizard's anguished wails seemed to echo in their ears, muffling their words. Ivan was not surprised to see the change in their expressions, having learned early on that some people in Knockturn Alley could not be reasoned with. Only oppression and pain teach villains.
There is no need for you to fear me. A sharp switchblade is only reserved for those who need to be punished. Those who are wise enough to see the situation and are willing to follow the rules will receive the most generous treatment. Now make your choice. All the wizards of Knockturn Alley are here, and you have the right to decide the future of this forgotten place. Do you wish to continue following the chaos of the past, or will you join me in creating a new order? I will give you 1 minute to consider. Those who agree, raise your arms. Those who disagree.
Ivan looked around the room, gesturing with his wand to the empty seats below the dais.
Step forward.
Time passed and the assembled wizards hesitated. Ivan's words had hit home, but they were not enough to make them trust him. Words were the least trustworthy thing in Knockturn Alley, not to mention the fact that they had been forcibly brought here.
Wonderful new home.
Chapter 732, Knockturn Alley Needs Order. As time passed, Ivan's heart sank. He had made so many preparations today, capturing all the wizards in Knockturn Alley in one go. If he could succeed in one fell swoop, it would be fine, but if he failed, the consequences would be severe. To Ivan's slight relief, with only 10 seconds remaining, a hand slowly rose. The wizards, who had been hesitating for a moment, turned to look. It was Mark. Mark did not waver under the scrutiny of the crowd. He stared at Ivan on the dais, then at his 9-year-old son who had been captured with him.
Perhaps you're right. Knockturn Alley needs order.
Mark's emotional exclamation touched the wizards present. However, there were soon objections.
Who knows if he's telling the truth? I don't think he had any reason to lie to us.
Mark cautioned, gesturing to the law enforcement officers gathered around.
Remember, we never had a choice.
Mark made it clear that the odds were against them, and there was nothing they could do even if Ivan had ill intentions. After a period of silence, more and more wizards raised their hands, and those who had objected were forced to bow their heads. A short while later, everyone in the audience raised their hands in agreement, and Ivan's heart finally relaxed. The 1-minute deadline had passed, but at least he had achieved his goal. The only unfortunate thing was that the mission completion alert did not go off for a long time. Ivan had an idea. He opened the mission column and saw that the progress of the task of tidying up Knockturn Alley had increased to 97%.
I'm glad everyone made the right choice. You and I are wizards of the Forgotten Land, afflicted by hunger and suffering, and we share the same belief that we should be united as brothers and sisters.
Ivan's smile faded slightly, and his words sharpened.
Some of you do not deserve to stand with us. They are the abusers of the weak, the murderers, the looters, the ones who bring us pain and make our lives worse than ever.
Ivan paced up and down the platform, his hawk-like eyes sweeping over the wizards whose faces had changed dramatically, and then he grinned and said,
I can understand the resentment and pain in every one of you, and I will allow you to vent it now. Push the perpetrators to me and face justice, and that will be the first thing I will do for you.
As soon as he said this, the orderly square immediately became chaotic, and an old witch screamed.
Are you kidding? Don't let him fool you. He's just trying to divide and enslave us.
We have more than 100 people here. Why don't we just charge out? Do you think they'll dare to kill us all?
Another few wizards agreed sternly. Ivan, however, paid no attention to their words. After casting a resounding charm on himself, he shouted at the audience.
Let's begin. Let's restore order.
Ivan's words were like a switch that had been thrown. The normally subservient and fearful poor people revealed fierce expressions on their faces. The suppressed anger in their hearts was completely ignited, and their eyes turned to the wizards who had just tried to cause chaos.
What do you think you're doing?
One of the dark wizards demanded. He instinctively reached for his wand, but it was too late. It was only then that he remembered that his wand had already been stolen by those hateful law enforcement officers. Even the few dark magic items he had hidden in his pocket had been looted while he was unconscious. He could do nothing but throw 2 fists at the mob.
Jamie Davis. You know me, Sir Harris.
Jamie's heart skipped a beat.
Of course I do.
Ivan said, amused.
You graduated from Hogwarts 21 years ago and made a living in the wizarding world by selling counterfeit goods. It wasn't until you killed an Auror who saw through you 14 years ago that you fled to Knockturn Alley, where you became a habitual thief and marauder, am I right?
Jamie's pupils contracted as he looked at Ivan with fear in his eyes. He could understand Ivan knowing that he was a habitual thief, but the fact that he had killed an Auror was a secret that no one knew about.
Ridiculous.
Chapter 733, The Interrupted Gathering. As Ivan spoke, the 17 magical runes engraved on the bracelet on his left wrist lit up.
Did Ivan have other sources of information?
While Dugster was racking his brains for an answer, Ivan had already told each of them their crimes and given them a trial. 9 of them were sentenced to death for their heinous crimes, and the remaining 16 were sentenced to life imprisonment. Ivan's cold judgment caused the 25 witches and wizards to fall to their knees, begging and crying, except for one elderly witch, who glared at Ivan and screamed at him.
You have no right to judge us.
The loin forcers gathered around the table snickered, and to their surprise, Ivan nodded in agreement.
You're right, I have no right.
Everyone present was stunned, even the old witch, who had not expected Ivan to agree with her. Before she could react, Ivan turned to the wizards below the dais and continued loudly.
Yes, of course I didn't have the right, but they did. It is not my selfish desire to judge you, but the decision of all the wizards of Knockturn Alley.
Ivan's words woke the wizards who were gathered in the square.
Yes, execute them. Hang these people from a pole. No, don't let them get away with it. Use the Cruciatus curse.
Another wizard shouted back, glaring at the old witch. The cries of the crowd caused a great deal of fear among the dark wizards who were about to be put on trial, and several voices suggested that Ivan should cut them up or torture them to death with the Cruciatus curse.
Silence!
Ivan raised his hand, his voice booming like thunder under the influence of magic. A few seconds later, the chaotic square fell silent again, and pairs of eyes turned towards the stage, looking at Ivan with more approval than before. At the same time, the system prompt for mission accomplished sounded in Ivan's head. However, Ivan had no time to deal with this for the time being. He focused all his attention on the hundreds of wizards below the stage.
My fellow citizens, I fully understand the anger you feel.
Ivan paused for a moment before continuing solemnly.
I promise you that each and every one of them will be judged fairly. From this day on, Knockturn Alley will welcome a new chapter.
Under Ivan's advice, the agitated wizards of Knockturn Alley gradually calmed down. Keeping an eye on their faces, Ivan nodded to himself, understanding that his authority had been tentatively established. Not only did he memorize the speech for the entire afternoon, but he also secretly rehearsed it several times.
Who's there?
Asked Flan and the others, pointing their wands in the direction of the voice. Under the dim night sky, a tall, thin figure slowly walked out. His dark wizard robe seemed to blend into the night, and only his red eyes could be seen.
What a wonderful speech.
Chapter 734, You and I Are the Same. After sensing an intruder, all the wizards except the few in charge of guarding gathered around and surrounded the intruder with dozens of wands. However, when they saw the other party's pale and strange snake face, no one dared to attack. Voldemort moved as if he did not see the wands pointing at him. On the contrary, the wizards surrounding him felt as if they were being strangled by the Grim Reaper, and it took all their strength just to breathe.
Mystery man.
One of the loin forcers shrieked, trembling so hard he could barely hold his wand. On the stage, Ivan cried out to himself.
Oh no!
Voldemort was far more intimidating than he thought. Due to the constant use of legilimency, Ivan could clearly sense the fear in everyone's hearts, and the situation that he had successfully controlled returned to chaos. Compared to the law enforcement officers who still had the courage to face Lord Voldemort, the wizards of Knockturn Alley performed even worse. As Lord Voldemort approached, they retreated repeatedly. If not for the fact that the other side had blocked the exit of the square, they would have fled in all directions.
Master, you have finally come to save us.
The dark wizards who were supposed to be on trial also ran to Lord Voldemort as if he were their savior. Due to Voldemort's power and influence, no one dared to stop the dark wizards, and they all fell to their knees, begging for Voldemort's protection.
You're healing fast.
Ivan said sarcastically, looking at Voldemort for a moment. Ivan took a few steps closer to Voldemort as he spoke, his aura growing stronger. It was not Ivan's intention to provoke the man. It was because he understood that his lack of action in the face of Voldemort's repeated provocations had dealt a huge blow to his accumulated prestige. If he showed any more fear, Ivan could not imagine how these seemingly loyal enforcers would turn around and point their wands at him. After all, other than Fran and the others, he had only known the other law enforcement officers for a short period of time. His credibility was questionable, and he was able to do things honestly because of his strength and influence. Now that Lord Voldemort, who was far more powerful and ruthless than Ivan, was right in front of him, Ivan was not confident that these enforcers would stand firm with him. Most importantly, Ivan wanted to see if Voldemort had fully recovered from his injuries. However, judging from the other party's nonchalant attitude towards the encirclement of dozens of wands, it was likely that Voldemort had returned to his peak condition. Otherwise, they would not have dared to act so arrogantly.
Of course, a few of my loyal servants are of some use.
Voldemort explained casually, showing no signs of anger at Ivan's veiled mockery. He then turned his head slightly and waved his wand to release the ropes binding the Death Eaters. Slowly, he grabbed one of the Death Eaters by the arm and pulled his sleeve open.
Like now, if I hadn't felt the call of the Dark Mark, I wouldn't be able to see such a wonderful scene.
For a moment, Ivan considered striking while Voldemort was distracted, but he resisted the urge, as Voldemort would never reveal such an obvious weakness in front of him and his large band of enforcers. As Ivan considered this, Voldemort dropped the Death Eater's hand and turned to face him.
Ivan Hells!
Voldemort whispered his name.
You know what? I was going to kill you, because you've caused me so much trouble, ruining my plans over and over again.
Voldemort's serpentine face twisted as he recalled the night 4 years ago and the battle that had taken place a few days earlier. If Ivan hadn't intervened, he would have achieved his goal without a hitch.
Big words!
If it weren't for the fact that he was worried about Alicia's safety and the fact that all the wizards from Knockoff Alley were here, he could have escaped. No matter how strong Voldemort was, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. Furthermore, he still had a trump card. However, it would be too wasteful to use it here, and he could not guarantee that he would be able to kill Voldemort.
In a manner of speaking, you and I are very similar, and you should be grateful for that, Howls. That is why I have changed my mind and decided to give you a chance to live.
Voldemort withdrew his murderous intent and looked at Ivan with a half-smile, his gaze distant, as if he were deliberately avoiding meeting Ivan's eyes, but his words continued.
When I was young, I learned that the vast majority of people in this world are mediocre, their vision and talent limiting their thinking, destined to be a speck of dust in an age.
Voldemort's gaze swept over the spellcasters who were pointing their wands at him but were too afraid to attack. His eyes were filled with disdain, so he quickly turned his gaze back to them and spoke in a passionate, high-pitched voice that was strangely compelling.
You, on the other hand, are a different matter, Hales. You and I are both gifted, and if we work together, there will be no one in the wizarding world who can stand against us. You want me to work with you against Dumbledore?
Chapter 735. Do you deserve to share the magical world with me? Voldemort is slightly weaker than Dumbledore with the Elder Wand, to be sure. Otherwise, Voldemort's arrogant nature would not have deterred Dumbledore from invading Hogwarts when he was at the height of his power. Of course, it is not so easy for Dumbledore to defeat and kill Voldemort, so the two men are in some sort of balance. He himself was the key to breaking the balance, and being on either side was enough to turn the tide. Ivan, however, showed little interest in Voldemort's proposal, shaking his head and saying,
I would advise you to drop these attempts at sowing discord, Voldemort. Really, you think Dumbledore will side with you? He might not tolerate your actions in Knockoff Alley if he knew.
Voldemort sneered as he looked around at the regulators surrounding him. He saw Ivan as one of his own kind, seeking power and recruiting in order to gain control of the wizarding community. Dumbledore, on the other hand, would never tolerate such a person's existence, and the only reason the two have yet to have an argument is because Ivan is better at pretending than he is, and has yet to be seen through by Dumbledore.
If you join the ranks of the Death Eaters, you will be my most trusted right-hand man and successor, and when Dumbledore is dealt with, we will rule the wizarding world together.
Lord Voldemort enticed. Ivan sneered but did not reply. He did not believe a word Voldemort said. If he agreed, then everything he did at Knockturn Alley would be in Voldemort's favor, and he would not only be under Voldemort's control, but he would also have to watch out for Voldemort's attempts to poach him and disrupt the order of Knockturn Alley. More importantly, it is unknown whether Dumbledore will even live to see the beginning of this year, so the situation is not the three-way balance that Voldemort imagined, but a real two-way battle. When the news of Dumbledore's death came, the non-existent alliance would crumble, and the growing Death Eaters would become another of Voldemort's trump cards against him. Ivan gave up on the idea of escaping. He understood that he had to fight today. Even if he could not reform Voldemort, he would have to make him fear his own power so that when Dumbledore died, Voldemort would not act rashly, and he would gain enough time to grow. The decision was made, and Ivan's fearful expression was replaced by a mixture of arrogance and contempt.
You think too highly of yourself, Tom. Who are you to share the wizarding world with me?
As Ivan spoke, he took the initiative to approach Voldemort, and red dragon scales appeared on his skin, covering his exposed skin. Under the influence of his dragon form, Ivan's aura became more and more imposing, and everyone in the square felt as if they were facing a great enemy.
I'd rather kill you here, and then find a chance to kill Dumbledore.
Ivan declared, stepping in front of Voldemort.
You do not know what is good for you, and you seek your own death.
Lord Voldemort laughed in anger, and he could no longer hold back his raging killing intent. He met Ivan's imposing manner, and the two were almost equally matched. The law enforcement officers on the scene were in trouble. They felt like small boats sailing on a huge wave, in danger of capsizing at any moment.
Together, kill him.
Alicia shouted. In order to not distract Ivan, she suppressed her worries and did not interrupt their conversation. Now that Ivan had made the decision to kill Voldemort, she naturally would not refute it and immediately called for everyone to attack together. She did not believe that so many wizards present could not defeat Voldemort alone. At Isaiah's shout, only a dozen of the 40 or so law enforcement officers responded at once, their wands glowing in various colors. The rest of the wizards were either slow to react or too scared to move.
Stand down, don't spoil my fun, you're no match for him. I'll deal with him myself.
Isaiah and the others were about to attack when Ivan interrupted them. The enforcers looked at Ivan in surprise, unsure of what he meant, but he waved them off and ordered Alicia and the other enforcers to back away as far as possible. Unless he didn't care about these people's lives at all, ordinary wizards were no different from burdens in a battle of this level.
You seem to have a lot of secrets.
Voldemort muttered fervently.
Compared to this, I advise you to think about how to escape from me.
Chapter 736, 60 Seconds to Die. The 60-second countdown appeared in the system column, and Ivan did not dare to delay. When the thought of destroying Voldemort rose in his mind, he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a few words.
You shouldn't be here today, Tom.
As Ivan opened his mouth to speak, a sudden sense of danger washed over Voldemort, and he jerked his head to the side as a familiar figure appeared beside him. Ivan's left hand curled into a fist, and his originally fair and slender arm rapidly expanded in just half a second, transforming into a ferocious dragon claw that flew straight at Voldemort's face.
You deserve to die.
Lord Voldemort was thoroughly enraged, and a violent fire rose from a crack in the worn floor, surrounding him to prevent Ivan from approaching again, while he waved his right hand and shouted.
Avada Kedavra, Avada Kedavra.
A beam of green light, as thick as a man's arm, flashed through the air. Voldemort's murderous blow was unimaginably powerful. However, Ivan was able to dodge the attack with ease. Under the protection mode, he was able to control the space within a 100-meter radius of him, and performing apparition was as easy as eating and drinking. The green beam missed and struck the wall behind them, creating a crater. Ivan appeared in front of Voldemort and pointed his wand. A red light shot out from his wand, which was even more powerful than the killing curse. Voldemort's scalp went numb and a rare look of panic appeared on his snake-like face. He summoned a solid silver shield out of thin air, and when the red light hit it, the shield instantly shattered. However, before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another beam of light came towards him. Voldemort blocked it with difficulty, but the aftermath of the spell left his face covered in dirt. Being repeatedly suppressed by a mere imp caused Lord Voldemort to become frustrated and frustrated. He waved his wand repeatedly, sending powerful dark magic flying out of it one after another, but was easily blocked by his opponent.
Impossible!
Voldemort's voice shook with confusion as Ivan drew closer. In his impression, although this young wizard in front of him was extremely talented and had already surpassed the level of an adult wizard before he even graduated, there was still a huge gap between their strength. If the other party was really that powerful, he would not have been able to escape that night a few days ago.
Confused Tom.
The minute was almost over, and Ivan was extremely anxious, but he managed to keep a relaxed and arrogant expression on his face. He waved his wand to summon the unicorn's shadow, which he used in conjunction with his spellcasting attacks.
This was supposed to be a surprise for Dumbledore, but you foolishly walked in and ruined it.
Chapter 737, This is impossible, the Dark Lord is invincible.
It doesn't make any difference if I kill you first, you worthless piece of shit.
Ivan said wickedly.
We'll have to do it sooner or later. Changing the order won't make any difference.
Under Ivan's constant cynicism, Voldemort's mind was thrown into chaos. In his shock and anger, he gave up on his tight defense, and the fierce fire surrounding him instantly moved. The violent tongue of fire rose high, like a python preparing to attack, and quickly burned towards Ivan. Ivan was well aware of how difficult it was to deal with a fierce fire, so he frowned slightly and shook the wand in his hand slightly. An even larger fierce fire emerged from the tip of the wand and expanded into the shape of a dragon. The two fierce flames quickly collided in the air, and the flames burned the tables, chairs, and cabinets around them. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, the larger fire dragon swallowed the fire python opposite it.
You want to leave? Stay.
Ivan looked at the protection pattern, which was about 7 seconds away from ending, and was not happy about it. He did not want to let Voldemort go so easily. Even if he could not kill him today, he wanted to teach him a lesson. With a wave of his wand, the scattered flames instantly transformed into a long whip that whipped towards the black mist. Lord Voldemort, who was in midair, sensed the danger and was about to dodge when a high-pitched noise came from below.
That's impossible. The Dark Lord is invincible.
Chapter 738, From now on, the wizarding world will change. Yvonne opened the system to check. The legend of the title, The Apprentice Savior, had disappeared and was replaced by another. Legendary title, Dark Lord. Legend level. Legend, you have crushed the wizarding market to show the world your unsurpassed power, and the shadows of the old days have retreated, and they will finally know who the true Dark Lord of the wizarding world is. Ivan's mouth twitched. He had defeated Lord Voldemort. Shouldn't he be the savior of the wizarding world? What the hell does he mean by inheriting the Dark Lord title? Ivan wanted to retort, but he forced himself to keep a straight face, as countless shocked, awed, and frightened eyes were fixed on him. It was clear to all of them that a new most powerful wizard had been born.
The Dark Lord is invincible.
And
that must be a fake Dark Lord.
The dark wizards who had previously chosen to side with Lord Voldemort fell into despair. Just now, Voldemort's imposing appearance made them think that their savior had arrived. However, who would have thought that the legendary Dark Lord would be so weak? In just a minute, he was forced to flee.
Rectifying Knockoff Alley.
Only strength and fear can make an ignorant fool see the truth, show your supreme power, and all will bow at your feet.
Where's my mother, Dobby?
Yvonne asked curiously. Mrs. Hales went out in the morning.
Isha's probably off dealing with Knockturn Alley. The fighting was so bad last night, you could probably see the flames from Diagon Alley. Maybe an Auror will come asking questions.
Why are you looking at me like that, Dobby?
Yvonne asked, noticing his intense gaze.
Dobby!
He shrieked, clutching his broom.
It's no big deal.
Chapter 739, The Dark Lord's Rise. Ivan's face clouded over. He had been given the title of the most powerful man in the wizarding world, despite his glorious appearance, but he was not happy about it. He knew full well that it was all a facade in protective mode, easily broken with a poke, and he was unsure how long it would scare Voldemort. If Voldemort sensed that something was wrong and decided to test him again in a short period of time, he would be at his wits' end.
Bad Dobby!
Ivan was shocked and immediately regained his senses. He quickly snatched the broom from the elf's hand and asked in confusion.
Dobby couldn't take care of his master.
Dobby looked terrified, his bulb-sized eyes filled with tears and his nose twitching. He believed that Ivan must have been upset with the tea he had prepared and thus vomited on him. Ivan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the house elf's morbid way of thinking.
This has nothing to do with you, Dobby. I was just thinking of something funny. If anything, I should be the one apologizing.
As Ivan was trying to calm Dobby down, the front door of the drawing room opened and Alicia, who had been out earlier, came in.
What is it, Ivan? Has something gone wrong in my absence?
As soon as she entered the room, she saw Dobby with his head down, looking as if he had done something wrong, and Ivan squatting patiently beside him with a helpless expression.
No, it's nothing, just Dobby making a fuss.
Ivan explained, shaking his head.
House elves are like that. You can't fix a habit you've had for years.
Alicia sighed. When Dobby first arrived at the house, he took all the housework away from them. He was so busy that he had to clean the floor several times a day. She wanted to reduce Dobby's workload, but whenever she mentioned it, the house elf would punish her with whatever she could get her hands on.
By the way, Mom, how are Fran and the others handling the arrangements I made last night? Are the wizards at Knockturn Alley behaving themselves? Nobody causing trouble, I hope.
Yvonne didn't want to dwell on Dobby's affairs, so she got straight to the point. Alicia had no intention of hiding anything, so she briefly explained what had happened that morning. Due to the damage caused by the battle, even after half a day of repairs, the traces of the battle were not completely cleared, and the 100-meter-long chasm remained in the square. The wizards of Knockturn Alley had been scared out of their wits the day before. All of them had behaved themselves, and many had even offered to join them as part of the regulators.
It just so happens that we're going to need to recruit some more men as well, or we won't be able to manage the ministry with just 40 wizards.
Alicia added.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yvonne nodded automatically. Although they would be able to recruit some Aurors to work for them, they would not be very reliable, and it would be safer to use the Aurors themselves. Ivan had the vague feeling that something was wrong. Wait.
This is today's Daily Prophet. You'd better read it.
Chapter 740, Ivan, why are you more valiant than me? Yvonne was surprised to see the paper, and her expression changed when she read it. On the front cover of the newspaper was a large moving picture which he was very familiar with. There was fire, a large area of rubble, and in the distance, a burning house.
How did this get out so fast? It doesn't make sense.
Ivan muttered to himself, frowning. While Ivan was puzzling over this, Alicia began to explain. Their actions the night before had been too widespread to be hidden from the owners of the shops in Diagon Alley and the wizards staying at the hotel. Although no one dared to enter Knockturn Alley to find out what was going on, it was the instinct of most humans to watch from a distance, so the riot was made known early in the morning.
Also, this picture in the Daily Prophet is not complete.
As she spoke, she took a magically animated picture out of her pocket and showed it to Ivan. Yvonne peered closer and her mouth twitched.
Is the person who took the picture still alive?
Ivan turned to Alicia and asked curiously.
He was alive and kicking when I got there, and you know who had just been injured by you. Even if he wanted revenge, he'd have to wait a few days.
Alicia chuckled, then paused before continuing.
Do you want to save him? Never mind. Let's get him kicked out of England.
Yvonne considered getting involved, then decided against it. In order to save her, she would have to bring that person to the safe house for his protection. However, Ivan could not even protect himself now. He was only pretending to be intimidating. There was really no need for him to risk his life for a stranger. He was already being kind by pointing out a way out to that pitiful creature.
How many people have seen this picture, by the way?
Ivan asked.
It's hard to say exactly how many, but it must have been seen by quite a few people.
Alicia began to explain.
Also, word got out that you had defeated you-know-who, but not many wizards wanted to believe it.
Even this information was leaked. It seemed that the wizards of Knockturn Alley were not very tight-lipped.
Can you not be so efficient? All of you look like you've been injected with chicken blood. We've been working all night yesterday. Don't you all need to sleep?
Ivan looked at Alicia with a particularly strange expression, and saw that, despite staying up all night, she did not seem tired at all. Alicia laid out the plan they'd come up with in one breath, then continued.
Anyway, now Duggart and the others are waiting for your next instructions.
Put it down for now. This can't be rushed.
Ivan said, waving him off. After a moment's hesitation, Alicia realized something and asked.
You're still going to deal with Dumbledore first.
Chapter 741, Magic Mark. Feeling helpless, Ivan hesitated to tell Alicia the truth. After a moment's hesitation, Ivan decided against it. He was not prepared to reveal the existence of the system to anyone, which meant that he had no way of explaining his sudden increase in strength. It would not be easy to temporarily increase one's combat power if Alicia mistook it for dark magic. After all, this type of dark magic, which greatly increases combat effectiveness and can only be used once, often has some kind of huge side effect. Even if he claimed to be healthy, Alicia would have to believe him. Most crucially, Ivan did not forget that Lord Voldemort was a legilimency master, and that Alicia had never practiced occlumency. With this in mind, Ivan gave up on the idea of telling the truth, and instead hinted that the blood magic he used to defeat Voldemort was too powerful for Acacia to use for a long time.
In addition, Dumbledore has reorganized the Order of the Phoenix, so the situation is a three-way balance. If we try to attack the Ministry, Dumbledore will not stand by and do nothing.
Ivan tried his best to console her, even going so far as to discredit Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix in order to remind her to be cautious, and not to let her ego get the better of her just because they had a little power. What if he went too far and Dumbledore mistook him for the next Dark Lord, even more evil than Voldemort, and tried to drag him to his death? Therefore, one had to keep a low profile.
By the way, Mom, call Fran, Duggart, and the others back in the evening.
Ivan reminded her as she reached the door.
Okay, I'll remember.
Alicia turned to Ivan, nodded, and left the living room without another word. Left alone, Ivan was still digesting the information he had received from Alicia when he opened the system's taskbar. Become the King of Knockturn Alley, completed. Objective, rectify Knockturn Alley, Ring 3. Task progress 100%. Task reward, magic mark, collect or not. Legendary points, 3, King of Knockturn Alley.
It's a good thing Tom's always had bad luck.
Chapter 742, Misunderstanding.
That should do it.
Ivan nodded at the picture in front of him. In his haste, he could not think of a more suitable symbol, so he decided to use this. Knock, knock, knock.
Come in.
Ivan said casually, waving his hand to erase the pictures from the table. With permission, the door to the drawing room swung open, and Alicia led the way in, followed by Doggett, Fran, and 40 other wizards. The originally spacious living room was instantly filled with people, making it seem extremely crowded. Due to Ivan's imposing manner, every wizard who entered was as obedient as a rabbit. No one walking out in this state would believe that they were a group of evil dark wizards from Knockturn Alley. Such obedience was, of course, justified, given what they had witnessed last night. They had the impression that this seemingly weak young wizard was capable of easily repelling Lord Voldemort, a powerful Dark Lord. The #1 expert in the wizarding world deserved it. However, despite their awe, they could not help but feel fear when facing Ivan. They had heard Ivan's brave words in Knockoff Alley the night before, and they certainly knew what kind of face he had beneath his gentle facade, which could hardly be described as evil, cunning, or ambitious. If one had to label Ivan, it would be a Dark Lord more fearsome than Lord Voldemort. The thoughts that flashed through the minds of Rosier and the others could not be hidden from Ivan, who was using legilimency the entire time. Misunderstanding.
Sir Harles,
Despite his personal friendship with Ivan, Doggett never forgot his place in public and always addressed Ivan respectfully. At first, it was just a way to boost his prestige, but as Ivan got stronger, his shouting became smoother and there was no longer any awkwardness.
I'm sure you've all witnessed the battle last night, haven't you?
Yvonne asked, taking a sip of tea, instead of answering Doggett directly.
of course, I will never forget the bravery and power of Sir Harles that night.
Rosier said with emotion. There was a certain amount of flattery in his words, but Rosier meant every word of it because he believed so. Ivan's speech was interrupted by Lord Voldemort's sudden appearance at the Wizarding Market that night, causing his good form to take a sharp turn for the worse, and for a time gaining the upper hand in the exchange of words and momentum. Therefore, Rosier was on the verge of defecting to Lord Voldemort's side. Fortunately, he managed to suppress the thought at the last moment and managed to hold on for a while longer, before he was able to witness the powerful Lord Voldemort being sent flying like a rag doll. He would probably never forget this extremely shocking scene until his death. As soon as Rosier finished speaking, the wizards present came to their senses. While they were angry at themselves for not being able to see what was going on, they quickly spoke up and praised Ivan for his heroic fistfight against Voldemort and his bravery in proclaiming the wizarding world. It was a pity that all of this flattery fell on deaf ears, as Ivan had always been indifferent to such dark history, so he quickly raised his hand to silence them.
All of you calm down. I didn't gather you here to flatter me.
Ivan said sternly. As soon as she heard Ivan's words, Doggett understood the gravity of the situation. If someone as powerful as Lord Voldemort tried to assassinate Ivan, not many people would be able to escape.
Sir Harles, do you want us to find out where you know who is hiding as soon as possible?
Flan asked. The only way to prevent this from happening was to catch you-know-who while he was seriously injured. Ivan shook his head.
No, I'm afraid you won't even have a chance to run away and deliver a message if you run into Lord Voldemort.
However, Ivan soon realized that such a reason was far from sufficient and could be used to determine Voldemort's location by hunting him down.
Besides, Voldemort will be of some use to me, and now is not the time to finish him.
Chapter 743, Such Valor is Unimaginable.
Yes, Sir Harles,
Said Warren, nodding solemnly. He understood that he had said too much this time. It was clear that Ivan was up to something shocking, including the Dark Lord. No wonder Ivan showed no intention of pursuing Lord Voldemort after injuring him last night. This was the second time Ivan had spared the man's life. He was ashamed that he hadn't thought of such an obvious warning and had been stupid enough to ask. The rest of the wizards were wise and could see this clearly. However, it was for this reason that it was so shocking. To use a mysterious person, whom everyone in the wizarding world feared and did not dare to call by his name, as a pawn was truly a bold move.
Sir Harles, if we can't take the initiative, how can we avoid being attacked by the unknown?
Walker asked curiously.
Next, I will engrave a magical mark on each of your bodies, through which you will speak directly to me. If necessary, I will also be able to use this magical mark to determine your coordinates and use it to perform apparition.
Ivan didn't try to keep them in suspense. He spent a few minutes explaining the effects of the magical mark, hiding only his ability to kill people directly through it. Walker and the others were excited when they heard the news, as they knew that the magical mark was a protective charm that would allow them to call for backup should they encounter a powerful enemy they could not handle. However, before they could celebrate for long, Ivan threw cold water on their parade. Although the magical mark could instantly transmit messages, if one was too busy or was delayed by something, they would likely not be able to rescue them in time. Therefore, this could only be used as a last resort.
Also, unless there's something important to report, I'm not allowed to be contacted directly with a magical mark.
Ivan added. He did not want these people to come to him for advice on trivial matters. He would definitely be annoyed. The assembled wizards nodded in agreement. In fact, they would not have dared to do so without Ivan's warning.
Let's start with you, Dugat, just in time to get rid of the dark mark on your wrist.
Ivan said, looking around the room, his gaze finally settling on Dugat.
You have a way to remove the dark mark.
Daggett was suddenly very agitated. After Lord Voldemort's return, the dark mark on his hand became more pronounced, occasionally accompanied by an unbearable sting. Over the course of the past decade or so, he had attempted to remove the dark mark, but every other method he had tried to do so had proved to be futile, so he had no choice but to give up.
Of course, it's just a mark spell, to be honest.
Ivan explained, knowing how the spell worked made it easier to undo. Doggett hurried forward and with a trembling hand pulled back the sleeve of his left hand, revealing the eye-catching skull mark on his wrist. A serpentine snake was slithering out of the skull's mouth, forming an inner ring. Ivan pulled out his wand and placed it against Doggett's outstretched wrist. As he poured his magic into the wand, the dark mark seemed to come alive. The serpent writhed restlessly, and a strange hissing sound filled the living room. Doggett frowned. He could feel two very different forces fighting against each other on his wrists. His forearm felt as if it were pressed against a hot iron, and black smoke was coming out of it.
You're dismissed.
Ivan waved Doggett back into place, then ordered Fran to step forward.
Duggart Rosier, Parkinson Macmillan.
Ivan instructed them.
We'll show you results in half a year at most, Sir Harles.
Having removed the dark mark, Doggett was in an exceptionally good mood, and he replied proudly. Rosier and the others also promised to prepare for the attack on the ministry as quickly as possible. Actually, there's no hurry.
Remember, you have to be discreet.
They nodded solemnly. They were too smart to guess what Ivan was planning, but they didn't want to make a mistake because of their missteps. Ivan then turned away from them and returned his attention to Flan.
Fran, lead the enforcers to manage Knockoff Alley and set up some rules. The atmosphere needs to be tidied up. If you see a suitable wizard, you can recruit him.
I'll keep that in mind, Sir Harles.
Flan said, bowing her head slightly. Ivan didn't bother to remind her that he trusted Florin's abilities and loyalty, and finally told her to take care of the wizarding market and send people to find the rare creatures.
Do you have any questions? Anything to add?
Chapter 744. Let's follow the old rules.
Sir Harles, forgive me if I offend you, but I think we should set up a publicity department.
Gleason suggested nervously as she emerged from the crowd. Publicity. Ivan raised an eyebrow.
Tell me about it.
With Ivan's permission, Gleason gave a little bow and began to rattle off the importance of setting up a publicity department. The entire British wizarding community is much larger and more complicated than Knockoff Alley. They may have been able to take over the Ministry of Magic by force, but there were many drawbacks to doing so, the most immediate of which was the subsequent chaos and trouble. Therefore, propaganda must be carried out to show all wizards that they are on the side of justice, and that everything they do is for the future of the wizarding community.
Honestly,
On his exploits, not only to see if he could get legend points, but also to promote himself and undermine the ministry's authority. Fudge's recent performance as Minister for Magic may have been unsatisfactory, but when it came down to it, most of his mistakes had been forcibly covered up and were not known. If they were able to do so through propaganda, they would not have to resort to violence. Furious wizards would simply throw Fudge out of office. The more Ivan thought about it, the more he felt the need for an announcement department, as having access to propaganda channels often meant having a say.
That's a good offer, Gleason, and you'll be in charge of the new department.
Yvonne said admiringly.
Thank you very much for your trust, Sir Harles. I will not let you down.
Gleason gave a slight bow, hiding her excitement as she slowly retreated back into the crowd. Looking at the high-spirited Gleason, Rosier and the others were filled with envy. They knew that from this day on, Gleason's status would greatly increase, leaving them far behind.
Anyone else want to say something?
Ivan asked, waving his hand as he looked around the room and saw that no one else was coming forward.
Well then.
The wizards were relieved to know that they could finally leave. There was nothing they could do about it. The faint pressure that Ivan exuded made them tremble with fear just standing there, so after bowing and saying goodbye, they all fled the living room. Ivan shook his head helplessly as he watched the retreating figures. It seemed that this misunderstanding would not be cleared up anytime soon.
Let's begin as usual. Oh, Tilda, I almost forgot that you don't have any memories of that time. In short, you can't surrender in this battle. You can surround and attack at will. If you can defeat me, I will release you from the cage.
Ivan briefly explained the rules of battle, then stood in the middle of the room and waited for them to attack. The 15 wizards present, their wand-holding hands shaking, looked at Ivan with fear and despair. Despite their superior numbers, none of them believed they could win. This was obviously not the first time such a battle had been fought. Although they did not have the memories of previous battles, they were not stupid. These days, no wizards were released. Instead, everyone was injured for no reason, and some even died from serious injuries. If not for the fact that they were not allowed to surrender, they would have knelt down and begged for mercy.
Don't worry, I won't go all out and I won't kill you. Since you're not going to make the first move, let me start.
Ivan was getting impatient, so he raised his wand first. Ivan suddenly broke off his spell, and a red beam of light came from the side. Avery was the one who attacked. His eyes were bloodshot, and he shouted through gritted teeth.
There's no way out of this place. Let's fight this demon.
Confringo, exploding thunder. Reducto, crushing. That's more like it.
Chapter 745, Magic.
Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum.
The moment the incantation was spoken, a large amount of white mist drifted out from the tip of the wand and gradually enveloped the enclosed room. This magical mist was developed by Ivan after several days of reference to Lord Voldemort's blood magic. The only unfortunate thing was that his white mist did not have the mind-disrupting and life-absorbing properties of the black mist, and was only used to block vision and weaken perception. However, these two factors alone were enough to ensure Ivan's success in a group battle. After all, as a spellcaster, he was completely unaffected by the mist and could see where everyone was standing. The once unified battlefield was soon divided by the white mist, and Ivan moved through the thick mist like an assassin, looking for any lone wizards and taking them out first. After a brief period of chaos, the remaining wizards reacted. They gathered in groups and worked together to create whirlwinds, which quickly thinned the fog in the practice room.
He's over there, 1 o'clock.
A keen-eyed wizard in the crowd shouted as he spotted Ivan through the thin mist. The people around him did not hesitate to counterattack, and several beams of magic flew out. Unfortunately for Ivan, who was constantly on legilimency, their every move was no secret to him. Thus, Ivan was able to dodge the spells effortlessly, sending a wizard flying with a series of spells. He then charged into the crowd in his dragon form, like a tiger into a flock of sheep, and kicked 2 wizards who were standing at the front of the group to the ground. Screams and wails filled the room. As these sparring partners were all extremely evil dark wizards, Ivan had no trouble fighting them, and was able to use all of his blood magic to the extreme. The battle lasted for about half an hour. By the time the white fog dissipated, all 15 wizards were lying on the ground. 4 had minor injuries, 7 were seriously injured, 1 was petrified into a statue, and 3 wizards needed to be rescued.
Never mind, I'll just try to increase the number to 20 next time.
Ivan muttered to himself. Since they lacked quality, they could only make up for it with quantity. He desperately needed enough pressure to push his limits.
That seems to make quite a difference.
Ivan sighed in exasperation. In fact, when his magic was abundant, ordinary wizards were not a threat, no matter how many of them there were. However, his bloodline magic consumed too much magic to last forever. The most obvious was the battle just now. Although he fought easily, it took a lot of magic power to maintain the white mist and dragon transformation. Combined with the frequent use of Boggart's transfiguration and the fact that he had killed a werewolf wizard with his magical eye, he only had a fifth of his magic left.
Magic!
Chapter 778. 778 Hermione will cry if you do this, 2 years ago. Chapter 746. Hermione will cry if you do this.
Come in!
Ivan said, regaining his composure. The next moment, the door to the practice room opened and Joseph and the others entered, trembling with fear. When he saw the dark wizard lying on the floor of the training room, his life or death unknown, Joseph shuddered and cautiously warned him.
Sir Harles!
Ivan replied casually as he dusted himself off, then headed for the door. Joseph and the others skillfully put away the wands of the 15 dark wizards and judged the severity of their injuries. The minor injuries were temporarily ignored, and the seriously injured were sent to the infirmary. After wandering around for a while, Joseph was surprised that no one died today.
Sir Harles!
Yvonne walked slowly down a corridor, where the 2 law enforcement officers standing guard greeted her respectfully. Seeing that they were nervous, Ivan smiled and nodded at them. Ivan's wicked smile sent a chill down both of the enforcers' spines. They had heard the cries of agony that had filled the room, and they knew that Ivan was fighting the prisoners rather than practicing magic. As such, they came to the conclusion that Sir Harles, seemingly gentle on the outside, was in fact extremely cruel, with such a violent and abusive streak that he would be upset if he did not hit someone every day. Ivan's face froze when he read their thoughts, and his smile froze on his face. It's over, Sir Harles is as temperamental as the rumors say, the 2 enforcers thought nervously. The veins on Ivan's forehead bulged and his mouth twitched. He resisted the urge to draw his wand and beat them both up. He didn't want any more rumors about his weirdness tomorrow. After leaving the basement, Ivan angrily deactivated the legilimency spell. As expected, the spell could not be left on forever, or he would die of anger. Ivan forced himself to calm down as he made his way to the living room. When he opened the door, he saw Alicia sitting on the sofa, reading some letters.
What can I do for you, Mom?
Ivan asked.
No, look, it's from your little girlfriend. It must have been there for a few days. It's in the letterbox outside the shop. I just happened to see it when I went over today.
Alicia said teasingly as she handed the letter to Ivan. Ivan took the letter nervously, then looked at Alicia helplessly.
Why are you reading my letters?
Noting Ivan's resentful expression, Alicia couldn't help but smile, vaguely remembering that she hadn't seen such an expression on his face in years.
I'm not trying to sneak a peek. I'm just trying to make sure there's nothing wrong with the letters. You know who might try to pull a fast one on them, tamper with the letters, and then pretend to be your friend and mail them to you.
Alicia explained. Ivan rolled his eyes, not believing a word of it, but he had no choice but to turn his attention to the envelopes in his hand and pull out the parchment. To Ivan's relief, Hermione only mentioned how she was doing and the interesting things that had happened during her visit to the Black family home. For example, George and Fred attempted to eavesdrop on the Order of the Phoenix meetings with their extendable ears, or she met a new witch, Tonks, who could change her appearance at will. Did Dumbledore know you were leaking information about the Order of the Phoenix? Ivan shook his head at Hermione's carelessness. The little witch was clever enough, but her mind was probably stuck on the students' bickering, and she didn't realize that they were in the middle of a real wizarding war. It would be a disaster if the letter was intercepted. Even now.
No, don't bother, Mother. I have a list of the vast majority of wizards and witches in the Order of the Phoenix.
Chapter 747, Order of the Phoenix Personnel List.
You have a list of members of the Order of the Phoenix?
Asked Isaiah, looking at Ivan in bewilderment.
Kinsley Shacklebolt, Arthur Weasley, Remus Lupin, Daedalus Diggle, Sturgis Podmore, Emmeline Vance, Mundungus Fletcher.
Ivan named a dozen wizards in quick succession, but did not include them, as Harry and the others did not qualify. Alicia was very surprised. She certainly believed that Ivan would not speak without thinking, and she knew some of the people on this list. They were indeed members of the Order of the Phoenix.
They're the main force of the Order of the Phoenix, and there are still spies and non-magical squibs that are not recorded.
Ivan added. These names were, of course, extracted from his memory, and if it were the same as the original time and place, the Order of the Phoenix that Dumbledore had re-established would be this group. Ivan was surprised to find that there were only a dozen members of the Order of the Phoenix. He was the weakest of the three factions, far behind his enforcers and Lord Voldemort's Death Eaters. However, Ivan soon recalled that Dumbledore had many friends, and his reputation in the wizarding community was second to none. All things considered, it was a force to be reckoned with.
Is Lupin the werewolf working for you undercover?
Alicia asked after a long pause. It seemed to her that Ivan knew everyone's name so precisely because there was a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Lupin, a werewolf, was the most likely suspect. After all, Ivan had the wolfsbane potion in his possession and was working on a cure for werewolves, so it would be easy to convince him to defect.
No, don't make wild guesses.
Ivan shook his head and quickly denied it. Although Alicia's imagination made sense, she was on good terms with Lupin, so it was better not to cheat him.
In any case, you don't have to worry about the Order of the Phoenix. I have my own arrangements. All you have to do is keep an eye on the Ministry of Magic and the Death Eaters.
Ivan began. He did not know exactly what kind of conflict existed between Alicia and Dumbledore, but the latter did not have long to live. Once the White Wizard was dead, all past grudges would vanish, and there would be no point in fighting the Order. Alicia nodded. If Ivan had a plan, then she would not add to it. Alicia looked down at the list of people who had just been recorded and sighed.
I didn't expect even Kingsley Shacklebolt to be a member of the Order of the Phoenix. According to Dugat, this man was very capable and didn't get along well with Arthur Weasley. I was wondering if I should try to recruit him.
Kingsley was probably just putting on a show. How could he have passed on information to Dumbledore about the Ministry if he didn't trust Fudge?
Ivan replied casually, looking through the letters one by one. One of the envelopes Isaiah handed to him was unopened and unsigned. Ivan looked up at Alicia, puzzled.
This letter is enchanted with a probing spell, so that if anyone but you opens it, the paper inside will immediately self-destruct.
Alicia explained.
Like this.
Ivan muttered to himself. He had a pretty good idea who sent the letter, so he opened it.
I knew it.
Ivan pulled out the letter and looked at the signature at the end of the parchment. As he had expected, the only person who would send him a letter in such a special way at this time was Nicholas Flamel.
What did he say in his letter?
Alicia asked curiously. Ivan briefly described the contents of the letter and then muttered to himself.
Well, the teacher congratulated me on defeating Voldemort.
Alicia was not surprised. A master alchemist like Nicholas Flamel always had a special source of information. Furthermore, more than 200 people had witnessed what happened at Knockoff Alley. If they wanted to investigate, they would not be able to hide it.
When are you planning to go over? Are you leaving today?
Chapter 748, The Riddle House Gathering. Snape stared at the mansion which had appeared out of thin air, and something occurred to him. Could the rumor be true? Other than that, he could not think of a reason why Voldemort would need to hide with the Fidelius charm.
You must have heard the news.
Snape had barely gotten to his feet when he heard a whisper and turned his head slightly. It was Lucius Malfoy. Lucius, in his usual aristocratic black robes, was frowning, his pale, pointed face looking uncomfortable.
What, you believe that rumor, Lucius?
Snape's eyes narrowed.
No, of course I do not doubt the master's power.
Lucius's right hand gently caressed the serpent staff in his hand, his gaze shifting slightly to the left as he casually replied. It was then that Snape noticed that his student Draco Malfoy was standing next to Lucius with a look of terror on his face, his eyes darting anxiously from side to side, occasionally glancing in his direction. Snape was surprised to find Draco there, but he didn't try to start a conversation. This was the Dark Lord's mansion, and it was possible that he was under surveillance. They were joined by the other Death Eaters who were whispering to each other. Snape could not hear what they were saying, but he assumed it had something to do with the rumor. The front door opened again, and a tall, thin figure entered the room. The front room suddenly became very quiet, and everyone shut up, bowing their heads slightly in the most subservient and humble manner.
You are welcome to this gathering.
Voldemort said in a hoarse voice as he reached the very end of the front hall. Lord Voldemort's gaze lingered on each of them for a moment before he continued fiercely.
But it seems that some of you are not so happy to see me.
The Death Eaters were terrified. Snape kept his head down to avoid meeting Voldemort's eyes, and Draco hid behind Lucius in fear. Lord Voldemort spoke as he paced the anteroom, sensing the fear that rose in the crowd.
Yes, I'm sure you've all heard some nasty rumors lately. The most powerful wizard in the wizarding world, the undefeated Dark Lord, suffered a major setback in Knockturn Alley, where he was defeated by a brat who had just turned 15.
Voldemort's deep voice, tinged with irritation, echoed around the room and no one dared to answer, and the silence stretched on until one of the Death Eaters shouted out in outrage.
It must be a rumor. The Master is the most powerful wizard who has ever lived and cannot be defeated.
The frozen atmosphere on the field was instantly shattered, as the Death Eaters reacted by lambasting the false rumors and praising the Dark Lord's power.
That's very good of you, Macnair.
Voldemort nodded in satisfaction, then turned his attention to the Death Eaters, who appeared determined but were actually dubious.
But I did have a bit of trouble in Knockturn Alley the other day. Nothing to hide.
The Death Eaters' eyes went wide with disbelief at what they were hearing. When they first heard the news, they scoffed at it. An underage brat defeated a powerful Dark Lord. Who are you kidding? This is even more ridiculous than Dumbledore's plan to join the Death Eaters. However, in the week following the news, Voldemort seemed to have vanished without a trace, and the pictures that went viral helped them to believe him. Now that Voldemort himself had confirmed the truth of the matter, Macnair felt a faint sense of his faith crumbling. Ignoring their stares, Voldemort continued.
As you can see, I underestimated my enemy and ventured too far. I ventured too deep into the enemy's camp in the mistaken belief in Ivan Harles's abilities and was set upon.
There were too many witnesses to the battle at Knockturn Alley that night, and it was impossible to keep it a secret. Instead of letting these people make wild guesses, it would be better for him to just say it and set the tone.
That brat must have ordered all the wizards of Knockturn Alley to gang up on you.
Lucius Malfoy defended.
You could put it that way.
Voldemort said, glancing at Lucius with a cool expression. Voldemort's words caused the Death Eaters to breathe a sigh of relief, as their master had been attacked by a large number of wizards in Knockturn Alley, only to be defeated and forced to retreat.
Master, did you summon us to attack Knockturn Alley and kill the brat?
Macnair asked. Lord Voldemort's flat, snake-like face twitched slightly, and he shook his head slowly.
There is no hurry. Ivan Harles has recruited a large number of men from Knockturn Alley, and you alone will find it difficult to stand against the sheer number of regulators.
Chapter 749, Everything You See is Just an Appearance.
Brute force is always the slowest method, and I have better ways of dealing with him.
Voldemort added. Macnair immediately shut up, and Lucius and the others relaxed. This meant that they did not have to fight this battle. One had to know that even the Dark Lord had fallen in the Knockturn Alley. The danger there was obvious. They might not be able to return alive.
You teach at Hogwarts, Severus, and should be familiar with Ivan Harles. What do you think of him?
Voldemort suddenly turned to Snape and asked. Snape was surprised by Voldemort's sudden question, but he recovered quickly and spoke after a moment of silence.
Difficult to assess.
Brute force is always the slowest method, and I have better ways of dealing with him, Voldemort added. Macnair immediately shut up, and Lucius and the others relaxed. This meant that they did not have to fight this battle. One had to know that even the Dark Lord had fallen in the Knockturn Alley. The danger there was obvious. They might not be able to return alive.
Very well, you did not lie, Severus.
Voldemort said darkly.
But yes, his disguise was excellent. You must not have seen his wicked, condescending face.
Snape and the others looked at him in confusion, unsure what he meant. Voldemort immediately recounted the events of the night in Knockturn Alley, leaving out the details of his battle with Ivan. Lucius and the others were shocked to hear that Ivan Harles had raised an army of regulators in Knockturn Alley and forcibly brought all the wizards there to the wizarding market. How bold and bold was that? Was he really only 15? Even Peter Pettigrew, who was standing beside Lord Voldemort with his head down, shuddered. Snape was equally surprised. He had been in contact with Ivan Hales several times and vaguely understood that he was not as gentle and polite as he seemed, but he could never have guessed that Ivan Hales harbored such ambition. He was like the next Lord Voldemort.
Ivan Harles mastered a charm that would temporarily increase his combat prowess, and intended to use it on Dumbledore to kill him in a sneak attack.
Voldemort's face grew darker as he recalled Ivan's arrogant attitude that night.
Severus, I need you to find an opportunity to deliver this message to Dumbledore.
Voldemort said darkly.
Yes, master.
Snape replied respectfully, suppressing his shock. Dumbledore would never have allowed him to grow any further.
Yaxley, since you work for the department, try to get the ministry to check Knockturn Alley, and I'll put McNair in charge of assisting you.
The Order of the Phoenix was worse than the Death Eaters he had just assembled, let alone the regulators. Dumbledore might not be a match for Ivan Harles, so he had to give the kid more trouble.
Master, the Dementors are considering our proposal, and they're not happy with the ministry's recent actions. I'm sure they'll turn on us soon.
Peter Pettigrew said cautiously.
Wormtail, I hope you understand that my patience is limited. I will give you 2 more weeks at most.
Voldemort began impatiently. He had had enough of these fence-sitters and was desperate for his true servants to return to him. The first step was to deal with the Dementors guarding Azkaban.
What about the werewolves? Master, the werewolves, led by Fenrir Greyback, are happy to join us on one condition.
Amicus Carrow bowed slightly and hesitated before replying.
They want the recipe for the wolfsbane potion.
Voldemort frowned. He knew who invented the wolfsbane potion, of course, and it would be a fool's dream to get the recipe out of Ivan Harles. However, he seemed to have thought of something and his frown disappeared. He turned to Snape. Before Voldemort could ask, Snape cut to the chase.
I have deciphered the recipe for the wolfsbane, but it will be less effective than the original. Well done, Severus. Even when my loyal servants return, you will remain my most trusted right-hand man.
Voldemort declared. He was very pleased with Snape's performance, which was the only good news out of all the bad news.
As for you, Carlo.
Voldemort turned his head and looked at the Death Eater.
After the meeting, inform the werewolves that I agree to this condition, but that the recipe will not be given to them until the ministry has been breached, and until then we will supply them with enough wolfsbane every month. Understood,
replied Amicus Carrow, bowing his head. After a series of questions and answers, the heavy atmosphere in the antechamber relaxed considerably, except for Lucius, who was still looking pale and anxious. It didn't take long for Voldemort's gravelly voice to reach them.
Lucius Malfoy.
Chapter 750, The Plan to Assassinate Ivan Hales. Lucius's body shook, and he knew that he could not avoid it today, so he forced himself to speak.
Master!
Lord Voldemort interrupted impatiently, speaking harshly.
Master, I implore you to give me 1 more month.
Lucius knelt at Voldemort's feet without a care for his image, his past pureblood honor and aristocratic self-restraint forgotten as he begged humbly.
Lucius, I have given you many chances, but you have not cherished one.
Voldemort looked at him with disappointment, then asked abruptly.
Do you still have the diary I kept at the Malfoy's house?
Lucius Malfoy, begging for his life on his knees, froze, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He had not expected Lord Voldemort to suddenly ask this question, as he had written in the diary 3 years ago.
You gave it to Ivan Harles, am I right?
Voldemort said slowly, a murderous gleam in his red eyes.
Master, I was only acting on your orders to get it to Hogwarts at the most opportune moment and kill any mudbloods who do not deserve to be wizards. I gave it to Ivan Harles because I wanted to use your power to kill him.
Lucius trembled as he spoke.
Yet you have accomplished none of these things, and you have damaged my diary, implicating another object of equal importance.
Voldemort's gaze sharpened, and before Lucius Malfoy could reply, he angrily waved his wand.
Crucio heart-wrenching.
An indescribable pain shot through Lucius's body, and he felt as if his flesh had been ripped open. He fell to the ground, writhing in agony. Draco, who had been standing nearby, was so shocked that he tried to shout or leap forward to save his father. However, the courage that had risen in Draco's heart vanished the moment he saw Voldemort. Draco looked as if he had been struck by a body-stabilizing charm. A few tears welled up in his eyes as he watched his father being tortured by the Cruciatus curse. After a minute or so, Voldemort put away his wand, and the screams and wails that echoed through the antechamber ceased. Lucius managed to get to his feet and begged in a low voice.
Master!
Voldemort tapped his wand and turned his attention to Draco.
At the very least, you followed my instructions and brought me your son.
When Voldemort turned his attention to Draco, Draco backed away in terror, almost falling on his face. Lucius was worried that Draco would say something that would offend Lord Voldemort, so he quickly said,
Master, my son Draco is only 15 years old and weak, and I fear he will not be of much help.
Lord Voldemort interrupted Lucius, his gaze fixed on Draco as he asked casually,
I hear you are in the same year as Ivan Harles and that you are acquainted with him. Is that correct, Draco?
Draco's face went white and he shook his head violently.
No, Master, I don't know him at all. He's the one I hate the most, the one who stood up for Potter and Weasley at school and got me into trouble, Snape.
Draco looked at Snape as if he had found a straw to clutch at. Snape did not disappoint and nodded.
Yes, Master, many people at Hogwarts know that Draco and Yvonne Hales do not get along. Yes, I would kill him.
Cried Draco Malfoy in terror.
Very well, in that case, kill him.
Lord Voldemort sneered. Draco Malfoy's face froze and his mind went blank. After a moment he stammered.
But
Voldemort said quietly,
you could think of something else, like putting poison in your food or setting traps.
Draco's face grew paler with each word, and he began to shake uncontrollably. Lucius also did not expect Voldemort to have the idea of having his son assassinate Ivan Harles. Given how cunning and powerful the other party was, the chances of them falling for it were slim to none. It was a move that would only lead to death. Realizing this, Lucius did not care if he offended the Dark Lord and tried to talk him out of the idea, but Voldemort forced him to swallow his words. Draco was cornered. He kept looking around as if he expected someone to step in and help him, but nobody responded. Lord Voldemort stepped towards Draco. Draco nodded in fear as he saw the strange snake's face inches from his own.
Very good, Draco. You are a brave boy.
Voldemort placed his hand warmly on Draco's shoulder.
If you manage to pull this off, I will not only overlook your father's faults, but I will treat you as a loyal right-hand man and...
Voldemort's voice seemed to have a magical quality to it, and Draco couldn't help but think of how he would be commended publicly for his successful mission, and how many Death Eaters would listen to him. At that moment, a voice called out,
Master, didn't you want me to start a fight between Hales and Dumbledore? If Draco attacks Hales now, it could be bad.
Voldemort looked back with slight displeasure. It was Snape. He did not avoid Voldemort's gaze, but there was a faint expression of doubt and worry on his face. Voldemort gazed at Snape for a moment, then laughed and explained.
There are many things to be prepared for, Severus. If your plan to provoke them fails, Draco will naturally be useful.
Chapter 751, Law-Abiding Nocturne Alley.
Anyway, I need to see results within 6 months, understand?
Voldemort added. Snape acknowledged this, and Draco nodded eagerly. Voldemort was very pleased, and his hand on Draco's shoulder tightened, and a thick black gas began to pour out of his shoulder where it touched his palm. Draco hissed softly and clenched his teeth so tightly that he felt as if his shoulders were being burned by hot iron. If not for Voldemort's might, he would have shouted. After what seemed like an eternity, the hand was withdrawn and the pain was finally over. Draco collapsed to his knees, cold sweat covering his forehead and back.
This is part of the reward I gave you in advance,
Voldemort said. A reward? Draco was confused. He thought the Dark Lord was torturing him. Draco hurriedly pulled off his collar and saw a skull mark on his shoulder. A black python slithered out of the skull, looking extremely magical and alive. This is the Dark Mark. Draco recognized it immediately. He had seen the exact same design on his father's arm, so he knew it was the Death Eater emblem. Half a day ago, Draco would have been overjoyed. He had always considered being a Death Eater to be extremely impressive, but now he had no mind for it. All he could think about was the assassination mission.
We're not in the wrong place, are we, Captain?
Sunny asked, looking around at the plaque that read.
Lecture, Trinu Wind.
3 years ago, she had visited Knockturn Alley several times, and vaguely remembered that the street was very chaotic at the time, and that there were often dark wizards with ill intentions squatting nearby, looking at her strangely and making her feel uncomfortable. Now, however, Knockturn Alley was completely different. It didn't smell as bad as it used to, and all the dark wizards with bad intentions were gone. Had Knockturn Alley changed so much over the years? For a moment, Sunny found this hard to accept.
How would I know? But this must be Knockturn Alley.
Dawlish shook her head, equally surprised by the change in Knockturn Alley. This was a gathering place for dark wizards, a place that was usually out of the Ministry's control, but now it seemed to be in good order, with slogans plastered all around the walls. With his keen Auror instincts, Dawlish was 100% certain that something was amiss. The two of them exchanged a few words, then decided to talk to a few people before deciding what to do.
Hello, ma'am. I heard there was a fight in Knockturn Alley the other day. Is that right?
Sunny asked.
No, you're mistaken. There was no conflict.
The witch said, narrowing her eyes and smiling.
It was just some friendly wizards having a nice bonfire.
A bonfire!
Sunny's eyes widened. Dawlish's mouth twitched. The middle-aged witch nodded and described the scene of the bonfire party to the two of them vividly. In the latter half of the night, a few drunk wizards were interested in competing in magic, but they burned down a house and caused a lot of chaos.
So what's with all this stuff?
Chapter 752, Goodbye Nicholas Flamel. In an attic dozens of meters away, Ivan looked down at the two Aurors who were blocking pedestrians and asking questions. He turned to look at Alicia and asked curiously.
If we say that, will anyone really believe us?
Don't worry, Flun's got all the wizards in Knockturn Alley talking to each other, and no matter how many times the Aurors try to get the same information, they'll just have to believe it.
Alicia laughed. Such an outcome was exactly what Fudge would have liked to see, and by their judgment, the Ministry of Magic would not look into it.
All in all, we'd better get some people in touch with them to sound them out.
Yvonne said cautiously. There had been too many changes in Knockturn Alley in recent times to be covered up with a few words. It was better to be safe than sorry.
That's fine.
Alicia nodded, not disagreeing with Ivan. Sunny and Dawlish were old acquaintances, having met several years ago and known each other well enough to know each other. The innocent and romantic girl, Sunny, was easy to fool, and Dawlish, despite her subtlety, had her own plans. Perhaps she could be won over. With that in mind, she decided to meet them in person sometime. Yvonne gave him a brief reminder, then left it at that. In his opinion, these two Aurors were nobodies. Even if they happened to discover some secrets, they would not be able to cause any trouble. Attempting to draw Alicia's attention to the pair was merely an act of caution. Considering that he had been delayed in Knockturn Alley for a long time, Ivan did not stay there any longer. After confirming that these Aurors were not much of a threat, he returned to the underground fortress and packed his belongings for the journey. Despite her reluctance, Alicia did not try to stop him. For Ivan, who had mastered the art of teleportation, it only took an instant to travel between the two places, and he was able to return once a week if nothing urgent had happened. After saying goodbye to Alicia, Ivan took his suitcase, thought about the coordinates in his head, waved his wand, and said the incantation.
Disillusionment.
With a spatial shift, Ivan vanished. When he returned to his senses, he found himself in a wide courtyard, surrounded by a variety of plants and strange alchemical creatures that were pruning the overgrown bushes.
It's nice to be back.
Yvonne said, looking around.
It's so peaceful.
To her, Nicholas Flamel's safe house was like a haven away from the world. There was no annoying scheming here, no need to worry about safety, and many advanced knowledge of alchemy. It was perfect.
Alley.
As Ivan stepped through the door, a swarm of finger-sized, chattering alchemical creatures gathered around his feet.
Long time no see, Yukaka. Where's the teacher?
Ivan asked with a smile as he picked up a
Little turnip head.
The tiny alchemical creature was startled when Ivan lifted it high into the air, and it grabbed Ivan's fingers in a panic so that it would not fall. Fortunately, the little turnips on the ground were not affected. They shouted and pointed in the direction of the living room.
Thank you.
Ivan placed the alchemical creature back on the floor and stepped through the hallway into the living room. Nicholas Flamel was sitting in a chair by the window, reading a thick book with gusto and occasionally sipping tea. It wasn't until he heard the noise from the front door that Nicholas Flamel seemed to sense something and slowly turned to see Yvonne approaching from the front hall.
You're back.
Nicholas Flamel greeted him, closing the book in his hand. Ivan sat down on a chair in the living room and explained sheepishly.
I received a letter from you a few days ago, but I was delayed because I had some family matters to attend to.
He glanced casually at the book in Nicholas Flamel's hand, then stopped. The cover of the book was outlined in black and white lines, and one could vaguely make out a short wizard being surrounded by a group of people. Wait,
Professor, the book you're reading.
explained Nicholas Flamel with a chuckle before continuing.
Last summer, when you left it in your room, I found it in the corner of your room when you were making your bed. I thought it was just an ordinary brochure, so I looked through it without your permission.
Yvonne was stunned into silence, reminded by Nicholas Flamel she remembered. The day before school started last year, Isaiah did give him a copy of the New Age Declaration, which he threw on the floor in a fit of rage after staying up all night reading. To his surprise, the alchemy robots found the book and gave it to Nicholas Flamel. Ivan suddenly looked extremely embarrassed. It was as if he had secretly written a dirty book and found his relatives and friends looking at it. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to bury himself.
Sir, that book was written by a friend of mine. Please don't take it seriously.
Ivan said sheepishly, mentally slicing Gleason into pieces.
I find that interesting.
Said Nicholas Flamel, not caring who Ivan's friend was.
It seems you're working in that direction, aren't you?
Chapter 753, Ivan, you call this hardworking. Ivan, of course, could tell what Nicholas Flamel was referring to, so he shook his head and explained vaguely.
I was just lucky. I might not have won against Lord Voldemort if I'd had to try again.
So you defeated the man. All the rumors about the wizarding world are true.
Asked Nicholas Flamel, bewildered.
Didn't you already confirm that?
Yvonne asked. If Nicholas Flamel couldn't be certain, why would he congratulate her in a letter? Nicholas Flamel smiled but did not reply. He had learned of Ivan's victory over Lord Voldemort a week ago, although he could not believe it when he first heard the news. If it weren't for the few clear photographs and the fact that the message was from Dumbledore's Phoenix, Nick Flamel would have suspected that someone was trying to fool him. After all, he had spent more than a month with Ivan the previous year and had tested Ivan's skills in magic. And although he was far superior to the average adult wizard, there was still a noticeable gap between him and the undulating earth demon. Logically speaking, no matter how talented a person was, it was impossible for them to improve so much in a year. However, all the information gathered later proved that this matter was true, so he sent a letter to confirm it.
I can't believe how fast you've progressed, defeating the infamous Lord Voldemort in the span of a year.
Said Nicholas Flamel, looking wistfully at the New Age Declaration in his hand. Hearing Nicholas Flamel's words, Yvonne realized that the master alchemist had been dubious and that he had sent the letter to test her. In a way, he had just confessed. Ivan was frustrated. He did not want too many people to know that he had defeated Voldemort, as he could not explain how he had done it. Therefore, before Nick Flamel could ask any more questions, Yvonne changed the subject.
By the way, teacher, I forgot to tell you that I've successfully completed the test you gave me last time.
As he spoke, Ivan took out a gray lump of metal from the pocket of his wizarding robes and placed it on the table. It was about half the size of his palm and strangely shaped like a badge. It was, in fact, a badge, but it was made in such a hurry that there was no time for detailed carving. Fortunately, Nicholas Flamel did not have any flaws in his unexpected views. When he saw the badge, he made a noise of surprise and picked it up to examine it.
You seem to have mastered the guiding spell I taught you,
Said Nicholas Flamel, confirming this with a few glances. At the same time, it was also likely that Ivan had gathered some sort of anger within the badge, which would cause an explosion if a little bit of magic was injected into it, activated, and thrown out. However, if he remembered correctly, his mission for Ivan should be to fix a crescent moon pendant. Why did it become this metal lump? Nicholas Flamel looked at Ivan strangely.
I gave it away after I fixed it, so I couldn't ask for it back.
Yvonne said sheepishly, thinking of the other day. Nicholas Flamel nodded but did not pursue the matter. What he really wanted to test was Ivan's mastery of channeling magic, as the badge had proven.
So do I pass the test and become your disciple now?
Ivan asked quickly.
Of course.
Said Nicholas Flamel.
Don't you always call me teacher?
Ivan was overjoyed. Although Nicholas Flamel had taught him a lot about alchemy, there was a barrier between them as they had not confirmed their relationship. He never dared to take the initiative to ask about some of the more advanced matters of alchemy, for fear of upsetting the master alchemist.
Now that you're my disciple, I'll assign you some heavy homework duties from tomorrow onwards. You'd better be prepared.
Nicholas Flamel said sternly as he wiped the smile off his face. He then took a parchment from his drawer and placed it on the table. Yvonne looked at it and saw it was a schedule. According to this, he had to wake up at 6:30 every morning, study alchemy with Nicholas Flamel from 7:00 to 12:00 p.m., practice making magic props from 2:00 p.m. to 5:00 p.m., then read until 10:00 p.m. after dinner.
Sir, isn't this schedule a little too easy?
Ivan said cautiously after reading it.
How can it not be? You only have a month and a half in all, but you have a lot to learn.
Chapter 754, Level 7 Alchemy. Ivan's words stunned Nicholas Flamel. He taught many students during his 600-year career, but he was the first to work as hard as Ivan. No wonder he was able to reach a level of magic far beyond that of ordinary wizards at such a young age. Nicholas Lemmy sighed to himself, but ultimately rejected Ivan's self-tortured study plan. After more than a month of high-intensity learning, even if one's body could withstand it, they would be mentally dispirited and might even affect their learning efficiency. It was simply a loss-making move. The most important thing was that his old bones could not take it. He did not want to wake up before dawn to teach Ivan about alchemy. In the long run, even if this kid could withstand it, he would not be able to.
What went wrong?
Ivan muttered, confused. Unable to make head or tail of it, Ivan decided to put the idea of a breakthrough out of his mind for the time being. Whatever he had learned recently would not be false, and his own alchemy had indeed improved, and that was enough. Ivan believed that if he continued to improve at this rate, one day there would be a qualitative change.
After being stuck for the better part of a year, I finally made a breakthrough.
Ivan said, sighing in relief as he saw that his alchemy skill had been upgraded to level 7. This was his 5th skill to reach level 7, and it was also the most arduous. Just by looking at the long progress bar, one could tell how much effort he had put into it. In order to break through this bottleneck, he used up all of his accumulated achievement points, read most of Nicholas Flamel's alchemy books, and mastered the art of guidance magic. Ivan would be devastated if the system did not recognize him as a level 7 alchemist. By contrast, he was highly talented in mind magic, and his memory charm, legilimency, and occlumency naturally broke through to level 7, with little targeted training. Ivan suspected that this talent might have something to do with his frequent use of the academic genius card to speed up his brain. Of course, the dark wizards who were kept in the cells were also credited, as Ivan often experimented on them in Knockoff Alley.
My magic has also increased by 22 points, almost as much as the last time I fused my blood.
Ivan nodded in satisfaction, muttering to himself. Starting at the age of 14, he was at the height of his magic's growth and would continue to grow faster and faster until he was 22 or 23. Ivan estimated that he would have 2.7 times the magic of an adult wizard by the end of the year. Unfortunately, it was still not enough.
Well, did it go well?
Nicholas Flamel asked as he entered the room.
Yes, it's all done.
Ivan nodded, proudly holding out his hand to show off the protective rings on each of his fingers. The corner of Nicholas Flamel's mouth twitched slightly. Ivan was prepared to use his newfound knowledge of alchemy to modify all of his magical tools and enhance their abilities. However, he did not expect Ivan to forge 10 enhanced protective rings and put them on his finger. Wasn't this?
Hales, I think you should know that the more magical tools you have, the better.
Chapter 755, Alchemical Enchantment and Magic Enhancement 1. These 10 layers of protection were very strong, but also relatively strong. A magical barrier that was difficult for ordinary wizards to break through was probably nothing to Voldemort. Ivan estimated that if he used all of these protective rings, he would be lucky to withstand a few of Voldemort's charms. Even so, Ivan was pleased, as it would greatly improve his room for error in battle, so that he would not be killed if he was hit by Voldemort's magic. Seeing Ivan's confidence, Nicholas Flamel did not try to dissuade him. These past few days of contact had taught him that Ivan was a very opinionated and rational man, unlike other children of his age, who tended to be careless and impetuous. The fact that he was able to forge so many protective rings at once showed that he was confident in being able to control them all at once. Thus, Nicholas Lemmer quickly changed the subject and asked him if he wanted to test the ring's protective properties. Ivan agreed without much hesitation. Although he had learned the exact strength of the protective ring from the system inventory, the description was not as intuitive as trying it out himself.
Are you going to fight me yourself, sir?
Ivan asked eagerly.
No, that won't be necessary. We'll just try it with it.
Nicholas shook his head and reached for a block of silver. Ivan was disappointed. He had always been curious about Nicholas Flamel's abilities. He had lived for over 600 years, and even if he did not like to fight and was only interested in alchemy, he would not be any weaker than Lord Voldemort. Yvonne had wanted to test her skills in a good fight.
Are you ready? I'm going to do it.
Nicholas Lemmy asked suddenly, clutching the block of mithril in his hand. Ivan cleared his mind of such thoughts and retreated to a relatively wide area, where he saw Nico's right hand jerk and throw the mithril block. At first, Ivan was confused. He had been the one to bring the magical ingredients to the table, and he hadn't had time to engrave any runes on them. Was he going to use Nicholas Flamel as an experiment? Even as Ivan thought this, a great sense of crisis came over him. The mithril pieces that were floating in the air had some sort of refuting pattern on them, like fine cracks, through which brilliant red light was shooting out. As soon as Ivan sensed the danger, he activated all of his defenses and lit up his ring, creating a barrier of magic around him. Almost at the same time, a piece of mithril the size of a knuckle exploded. A violent roar filled the lab, and a fiery tongue of fire, rapidly expanding with red light, filled Ivan's vision, colliding with the barrier of magic that stood between them. The first layer of protection resisted for a moment before shattering, but it also weakened the attack to some extent. The second layer of protection at the rear lasted for a while, and soon the magic barrier was covered in cracks and shattered. The aftermath of the explosion did not break through the third layer of protection, and Ivan, who was in the middle, slowly breathed a sigh of relief. By the time the smoke cleared, the lab was in shambles. Tables and chairs had fallen to the floor, and magical materials such as yew and mithril were strewn all over the floor. With a casual flick of his finger, the table and chairs that had been knocked to the ground quickly stood up, and the scattered magical materials fell back into place. When he was done, he turned to Ivan and asked,
How was it? The explosion broke through several layers of protection.
2 layers. If the attack had been any stronger, the third layer might have been breached.
Ivan raised his left hand. The protective rings on his index and middle fingers were so dim that they could not be used for a day.
It's good. Looks like it's at least 3 times as strong as it was before,
Said Nicholas Flamel, nodding. He had deliberately gathered his strength for a while, almost as if he were attacking with high-intensity explosive magic while holding his wand. Even so, he had only broken through 2 layers of protection, indicating that Ivan's magical tools were more powerful than he had expected.
Sir, how did you do that? Why did that piece of mithril suddenly explode?
Ivan asked curiously. He was fairly certain that it was an ordinary piece of mithril, untreated, and was amazed when Nicholas Flamel simply threw it and it created an explosion-like effect.
I just temporarily enchanted a piece of mithril and injected some of my anger into it,
Said Nicholas Flamel, revealing the truth. It was technically a high-end magical technique, but it required a lot of alchemical knowledge. Once mastered, one would be able to instantly enchant the materials used to conduct the spell. It was very convenient for both attacking and defending against damage. One could even use guidance magic to increase its power. Centuries ago, it was used by many powerful alchemists as a means of supporting their attacks. The only drawback was that it burned a lot of money, and the mithril with the best conducting properties was worth a lot of money. For example, the one that Nicholas Flamel threw out was worth over 10 galleons. However, this was acceptable to Ivan at the moment. After all, the wizarding market was profitable every day. A month's net profit should be enough for him to fight a few battles with all his might. Even more interesting to Ivan was the fact that this instantaneous enchantment could be compared to casting without a spell. Alchemy and magic were 2 very different things. Both involved the use of magic to achieve one's goals. If he could learn how to enchant quickly, it might help him master non-charm and non-stick magic. With this in mind, Ivan pestered Nicholas Flamel about how to use enchantment.
Even if you hadn't mentioned it, I was planning to include it in my class in the next few days,
Said Nicholas Flamel rather helplessly. Ivan's learning progress was too fast, far beyond his expectations, and his foundation was very strong, so that in just 2 summers he had almost exhausted his foundation. Ivan was pleased to receive the approval of Nicholas Flamel, who seemed to him to have a wide range of uses for quick enchantments, which might work in a fight.
By the way, Professor, is there any way to make a wizard's magic improve quickly in a short period of time?
Chapter 756, The Powerful Philosopher's Stone.
Why do you ask?
Asked Nicholas Flamel, looking surprised and curious.
I don't have enough magic,
Ivan said, sighing with frustration. Too little magic? Nicholas Flamel stared at Ivan in amazement. Ivan seemed to have 7 or 8 times the magic of his peers, enough to be squandered. Ivan was forced to explain that he had mastered several powerful spells, and that his magic was not strong enough to support a large battle. More than a month ago, he was lucky enough to have defeated Lord Voldemort, but if the latter hadn't been frightened and had come to test the waters, he would have been completely out of his depth.
There are many ways to improve one's magic in a short period of time, but most of them involve dangerous magical transformations. I'm afraid the rest are not very suitable for you,
Nico said after a moment. Ivan sighed in disappointment. He knew there was no such thing as a risk-free method of increasing one's magic. To Ivan's surprise, however, Nicholas Lemmer continued after a pause.
If all you want is to get plenty of magic in a fight, there are tricks.
Ivan's spirits lifted, and the disappointment on his face vanished. He looked at the alchemist in front of him and hurriedly asked.
What is it?
Magic was his last weakness. If he could solve it successfully, Ivan estimated that he would be able to fight Voldemort with his unlimited use of blood magic and alchemy tools. Nico Flamel smiled and dropped the subject.
That would require the use of the stone's powers.
The Philosopher's Stone. Ivan was very excited when he heard this. His alchemy had just broken through level 7, reaching the minimum requirement for making a Philosopher's Stone. Ivan's original plan was to quickly gather the required materials and create his own Philosopher's Stone, then activate the money printing machine to mass-produce gold to supplement his household expenses. He did not expect that this thing could solve his lack of magic.
What exactly should I do, Professor? Continue to study alchemy step by step. With your current level of alchemy, you still have some homework to catch up on. You should be able to do that by the time you master enchantment.
Nicholas Flamel replied. Ivan frowned and stopped himself. There were only 10 days remaining until the beginning of the next term, and he was worried that he would not have enough time to master enchantment. After all, he had used up all his GPA.
I understand, teacher. I will master the enchantment within 10 days.
Ivan was determined to master the spell within 10 days without the help of the system. If she failed, Ivan would have to resort to a last resort, claiming ill health and taking a few days off to attend Hogwarts. Alternatively, you could skip some of the less important classes and go to Hogsmeade and then disapparate from there into the safe house. Unaware that Ivan was prepared to face death with equanimity, Nicholas decided to play hooky. In his opinion, Ivan was extremely gifted in the field of alchemy and would have no trouble mastering the basics of enchantment in 10 days. Seeing that it was almost time for dinner, the two of them chatted as they walked towards the living room. After a quick dinner, Ivan did not rest for a moment, but immediately immersed himself in the study of alchemy. Instead of going through the usual esoteric books on alchemy, he asked Nicholas Flamel how to use enchantment. Time was limited, and he did not want to waste a moment. Knowing exactly what Ivan was thinking, Nicholas Lerm spent hours explaining how to use it and what to look out for. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Ivan, self-conscious of his theoretical knowledge, eagerly entered the lab for his first attempt.
Hold the conducting material in the palm of your hand and engrave the runes on it with your mind.
Ivan silently went over the steps in his mind. This method is easy to say, but difficult to implement. Normally, he would use a special carving knife to inscribe magic runes on alchemy tools. Now, he needed to remove this step and use his mind to drive magic instead of the carving knife to complete the task. No wonder he could complete the enchantment in an instant. Ivan tried to pick up a piece of mithril metal and hold it in his palm, but when he tried to start, he was stopped by Nicholas Flamel.
Give me a moment to set this up.
Nicholas Flamel pulled out his wand and waved it. The tables and chairs in the lab automatically flew to a corner. He then placed a large number of defensive barriers around the room to prevent the entire lab from being destroyed.
If you sense that something is amiss, remember to throw away your mithril metal at once.
Nicholas Flamel warned solemnly.
That bad?
Chapter 757, Enchanted Magic. Ivan was very worried. The piece of mithril that Nicholas Flamel had thrown at him had blown up 2 layers of protection in a row. Its power was astonishing. If he held it in his palm and did not react in time, he would lose his entire hand. Therefore, Ivan, who had always valued his life above all else, decisively activated his bloodline magic dragonification. Crimson dragon scales quickly appeared on his right hand. Nicholas Flamel was amazed at what he saw. He had heard about Ivan's blood magic from Dumbledore, but this was the first time he had actually seen it. Having made all the necessary preparations, Ivan clenched his fists and experimented with the method that Nicholas Flamel had taught him. At first, everything went well, and Ivan was able to cover the surface of the mithril with his magic. As mithril was very hard, he had no idea how to leave a mark on it with his will.
Unfortunately, it didn't work.
Ivan picked up a shard and sighed in frustration. It took him a long time to find the method, but before he could even finish inscribing a simple rune, the magic he injected into it went out of control.
Don't worry now that you've found a way. All that's left is to keep practicing.
Nicholas Lerm assured Ivan, impressed by his exceptional talent. Ivan nodded, collected himself, and went back to trying out a piece of mithril. The lab was soon filled with explosions. Ivan was unable to get the hang of it this time, and the whole night's practice had little effect, as he was unable to complete even the most basic of runes. Nicholas Flamel was relieved to see this. He would have doubted his life if Ivan had been able to learn it in a matter of hours. It had taken him, who was once known as an alchemy genius, half a month to grasp the basics of this enchantment.
It worked!
Ivan exclaimed, looking at the glowing runes on the mithril in his hand. Intrigued, Nico Flamel approached Ivan to check that everything was in order, then suggested that Ivan throw it out. Ivan did not refuse Nicholas Flamel's offer. He immediately injected some magic into the metal block to activate it, then threw it out. The finger-sized piece of mithril glowed brightly in midair, then expanded 100 times in size and smashed into a nearby wooden cabinet, creating a large hole.
It worked very well,
Said Nicholas Flamel, smiling.
"It seems you succeeded, much more quickly than I expected."
The first simple charm he had given Ivan was to enlarge an object for 3 or 4 hours, which at times worked wonders. Ivan was overjoyed when he heard this. He worked overtime and finally mastered the enchantment within 10 days, fulfilling his promise to Nicholas Flamel. Thinking of this, Ivan hurriedly turned to look at the alchemist beside him and said with golden eyes,
"Teacher, that philosopher's stone."
Chapter 758, The Way to Make a Philosopher's Stone. Ivan's excitement slowly died down as he listened to Nicholas Flamel. He knew very well that this master alchemist was not wrong. He had only mastered the basics of inscribing runes on mithril and was still a long way from being able to use them freely in battle. With that in mind, Ivan calmed down and picked up another piece of mithril to practice.
"What do you think the philosopher's stone is?" "A very powerful alchemical substance."
Ivan asked hesitantly. His knowledge of the philosopher's stone came from reading about it in books, and he had no real knowledge of it.
"That's one way to put it, but it's also a huge source of magic, and if its user can master a certain method, they will be able to channel this vast amount of magic to achieve their goals. The well-known popping stone to gold, the elixir of life, and so on are all results of magical use."
Nicolum went on.
"It's like trying to do magic in a different way."
Ivan muttered, rubbing his chin.
"That's right. I should have told you that in the end, magic and alchemy are both derived from the use of magic."
Nicholas nodded, then proceeded to explain to Ivan.
"The difference between the two is that one relies entirely on its own magic, while the other can choose an external force."
Ivan was thoughtful for a moment, but she soon understood the meaning of Nicholas Flamel's words. Alchemy was the same as wands, charms, and gestures, and its purpose was to channel magic, while the philosopher's stone could be used as another source of magic. However, if one possessed magic, why would they deliberately create a stone, just to increase their own magic? Nicholas Flamel had been watching Ivan's face, and he could read Ivan's mind.
The magic of an ordinary wizard is extremely limited, and not everyone is gifted, having several times the magic of an adult wizard at such a young age.
So it is common for some alchemists to resort to outside help in order to master higher levels of magic.
What do you think the philosopher's stone is? A very powerful alchemical substance? Ivan asked hesitantly. His knowledge of the philosopher's stone came from reading about it in books, and he had no real knowledge of it. That's one way to put it, but it's also a huge source of magic, and if its user can master a certain method, they will be able to channel this vast amount of magic to achieve their goals. The well-known popping stone to gold, the elixir of life, and so on are all results of magical use.
"How am I supposed to make one?"
Ivan asked quickly. Nicholas Flamel did not try to hide anything, and quickly explained the steps and materials needed to make the stone. The core ingredient was a rough stone used to store magic, which was extremely rare and could not be found on the market. Raw stone? Ivan frowned. He had seen this material in the system's instructions on how to make a stone. However, due to his lack of skill in alchemy, he did not prepare these materials in advance, and he did not expect the raw stones to be so rare.
"As it happens, I have a stone here for you."
Thank you, teacher.
Ivan stood up gratefully and bowed solemnly. Although he and Nicholas Flamel were master and disciple, they had only known each other for less than half a year, yet the other party was willing to teach him without asking for anything in return, and even gave him such a valuable magical material as a gift. This kindness was beyond description. Nicholas Flamel dismissed Ivan's concern with a wave of his hand. The stone was of no further use to him, and it would be better to leave it in Ivan's possession than to leave it there to grow ash.
"Also, you'd better not celebrate too soon." In addition to gathering the required materials, you'll need to master enchantment thoroughly and find a place where there's plenty of magic and set up an alchemy array to channel it. I won't be able to help you this time.
Nicholas Flamel said sternly. Ivan nodded. As a self-reliant man, he never expected Nicholas Flamel to help him with the construction of the stone. However, Ivan was slightly puzzled. What kind of place was considered rich in magic? In response to Ivan's question, Nicholas Leary pondered for a moment, then said,
Perhaps you could look in Hogwarts. Hogwarts!
exclaimed Ivan.
That's right, the school has been running smoothly for over 1,000 years, and presumably it has a magical storage room that absorbs the magic that is escaping around the school to power the castle.
Chapter 759, Immortality and Immortality 1. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Ivan was able to master the alchemical array to channel magic before the start of the school year at Hogwarts. However, his practice of enchantment was not as smooth, and he was still unable to enchant an object within a second. However, creating a philosopher's stone was not something that could be done in a short period of time, so Ivan was very open-minded. At most, he would just practice more at school. On the 1st of September, the day of school, Ivan got up early, grabbed his packed suitcase and hurried downstairs. Perhaps it was because they were going to part ways, but breakfast was particularly sumptuous today, filling the table. Hard-working alchemical creatures bustled about, and when they saw Ivan approaching, they enthusiastically pushed a chair out for him. Ivan was flattered by the warm reception he received for the first time. He looked at Nicholas Flamel in surprise, but he said nothing. He smiled and pointed at the food. Yvonne laughed too and gave up thinking about it. She helped herself to a fork and knife, and Nicholas Flamel helped himself. About 15 minutes later, seeing that the departure time was approaching, Ivan, who had eaten his fill, put down his cutlery and turned to look at the white-haired Nicholas Flamel.
Teacher, thank you very much for your guidance during this period of time. I will come and see you again next summer.
Yvonne knew that material rewards meant little to a master alchemist like Nicholas Flamel. All she could do was spend more time with him. However, when he finished speaking, Nicholas Flamel shook his head.
You are the most gifted student I have ever met, Hulse. You have completed all the lessons I have prepared for you in just 1.5 months. I do not think I have much more to teach you.
Ivan hurriedly replied. The more she learned about alchemy, the more she understood how profound it was. At level 7, he was only qualified to access the most advanced knowledge of alchemy, and it would take him at least 8 to 10 years to fully understand it. And that was with the help of a teacher and a system. Therefore, hearing this from Nicholas Flamel all of a sudden caused Ivan to feel very nervous, even vaguely uneasy.
There is no need to belittle yourself. With your current level of alchemy, you are worthy of the title of Master Alchemist. You will have to find your own way, and no one will be able to help you.
Nicholas Flamel's face was calm as he slowly explained. Ivan was eager to say something, but was interrupted by Nicholas Flamel.
Do you remember the question you asked me the other day? Problems?
Yvonne searched her memory and remembered that she had asked Nicholas Flamel a few days ago why he had destroyed the stone, but she had not given her answer.
Now I can answer that.
Nicholas Flamel said freely.
No need.
Ivan looked at the master alchemist in surprise, unable to understand. He would never give up such a precious treasure unless he was about to die. Wait.
You were right, Hales. There are limits to everything. The power of the philosopher's stone allows one to live forever, but not forever.
Nicholas Lear nodded, revealing the truth.
In other words,
Ivan stammered, or perhaps he didn't want to say what the result was.
Come to think of it, I should have died a long time ago, but I used the power of the philosopher's stone to delay the inevitable for over 500 years.
Nicholas Flamel said with great emotion, a faint smile on his face, his fear of death invisible. From the moment he used the stone to brew the elixir of life, he never stopped drinking it, and his resistance to it grew. In the beginning, he only needed to drink 1 bottle every 3 years to maintain his bodily functions, but his recent resistance had become so strong that he had to drink the potion regularly every few days, and his body was no longer what it used to be. Although Nicholas Flamel was technically able to hold on for a few more years, the potion's effects on aging had completely worn off, and there was no point in leaving him alone. It was for this reason that he lent the stone to Dumbledore, so that he could plot against you-know-who and destroy the stone afterwards. After all, the last thing keeping him alive was gone, and he would have stopped taking the potion and been buried with his wife if Ivan hadn't given him the idea of raising a worthy heir. Now, Nicholas Flamel was certain that this talented and hard-working young wizard in front of him would one day surpass him in the future, and might even be able to explore the final destination of alchemy. And now that he had fulfilled his final wish, he could finally accept death.
Death is nothing to be afraid of, Hals. It is a part of life, a long period of peace and quiet, a process that everyone must go through.
Nicholas Flamel comforted Ivan, who was in low spirits, and handed him 2 thick books. Ivan took the book and looked at it. It was the Book of Abraham, a Jewish book, and the Book of Hieroglyphs.
I came across the first book by accident in my early years. It contained a lot of advanced alchemical knowledge, and it took me 21 years to decipher it and study it in depth to create a philosopher's stone.
Chapter 760, Start of School and Prefect Badge. Ivan held the 2 heavy books to his chest, feeling the weight of this legacy. After a moment's hesitation, Ivan put his suitcase aside and looked at Nicholas Flamel.
Teacher, I can stay with you for a while.
Ivan was being very serious. He felt that he had to do something for her, even if it was something trivial like seeing her off.
I'm glad you feel this way,
said Nicholas Flamel, shaking his head slowly.
but there's no need. The alchemical creatures will take care of me. Please allow an old man a final moment of peace,
Added Nicholas Flamel with a laugh. Seeing the determination in Nicholas Flamel's voice, Ivan gave up on the idea of staying, though his mood was worse than before, as he suddenly remembered that it was not only Nicholas Flamel who was dying, but also Dumbledore. Ivan had mixed feelings about this headmaster of Hogwarts. Despite his poor relationship with Alicia, he was, in all fairness, treated her well, and Ivan would not have wished to hear of her death if he could help it. Unfortunately, Dumbledore's dark arts was tricky, and if even Nicholas Flamel, who was far more skilled in the art of alchemy than he was, and Snape, the most accomplished potions master in Britain, could not think of a solution, what could he do? After bidding farewell to Nicholas Flamel, Ivan left the house, looking slightly upset. Before leaving, he took one last look around the courtyard and saw the Yukakas, who had piled themselves into a large robot, waving at him enthusiastically. Ivan nodded, waved goodbye to them, and waved his wand vigorously.
Disillusionment. They're quite ruthless, sir, wiping out the coordinates.
Ivan muttered to himself, but he quickly collected his emotions and stepped onto the 9 3/4 platform with his suitcase. It was the beginning of the school year, and the wizarding station was bustling with noise and activity. The Redskins' Hogwarts train was parked on the platform, and thick smoke was pouring out of the huge chimneys, making the whole station look misty. Ivan also happened to see the Weasleys, Harry Potter, Hermione Weasley, and the others at the door of the next carriage.
Hi, Ivan,
Said Harry, waving happily when he spotted Ivan. Next to him, George and Fred, who were blocked by Arthur Weasley, looked at each other and smiled. The 2 of them suddenly waved their wands and teleported to Ivan's side. Unfortunately, Ivan was nowhere to be seen before they could reach him.
George Weasley, what are you doing, trying to show off your new magic?
Ivan called from behind them.
Hey.
George turned around and realized that Ivan had teleported behind him. He had intended to surprise Ivan with a surprise meeting, a shock, but he was surprised at how vigilant Ivan was. Fred explained.
We learned apparition a long time ago, we just never had the chance to use it.
George added proudly. However, the Weasley brothers were not happy for long, as a grim-faced Mrs. Weasley came over and pulled them aside for a good scolding. She got into a lot of trouble over the summer because of George and Fred's random spells, and was almost caught by muggles on the way to Kingdom Cross Station when George cast a levitation charm in high spirits. Ivan looked at the Weasley brothers, who still had the leisure to wink at him after being reprimanded by Mrs. Weasley, and shook his head in amusement. When he turned to greet the others, a figure ran straight into his arms.
Hermione, long time no see.
Ivan greeted her with a smile as he threw his arms around her.
Oh, it's been so long, Yvonne.
The little witch squeezed her arms enthusiastically and curled up in Yvonne's arms, as if she were releasing 2 months of longing. It wasn't until the Hogwarts train let out a long cry that Hermione regained her senses, as well as the fact that everyone around her was looking at her suggestively, that she managed to struggle out of Ivan's arms, pretending that nothing had happened. Ivan reluctantly let go and then greeted Harry and the others, who were surprised to see Sirius, Moody, and Lupin. After some subtle questioning, Ivan realized that they were all there to protect Harry.
Did something happen?
Yvonne frowned, but before he could question her, the young witch intervened.
By the way, Ivan, you must have received the letter from the school, too.
Letter? What letter?
Yvonne asked.
Of course, prefect badges and letters of appointment. I got them this morning.
Hermione exclaimed as she took a letter and a badge from her pocket. Yvonne took the badge and looked at it. It had a picture of a roaring lion with a large P in the middle.
Congratulations on becoming a prefect, Hermione.
Ivan said, returning the badge with a smile, pleased for the little witch.
Thank you.
Chapter 761. This must be another test of friendship and love.
Where's your badge, Ivan?
Hermione asked Ivan, putting the prefect's badge away.
I don't know, I didn't receive any similar letters. Perhaps Professor Dumbledore intended to make someone else a prefect.
Ivan said hesitantly, shaking his head.
That's impossible. Prefects are usually the best of the 5th year.
Hermione exclaimed.
You were awarded the Order of Merlin in the first class, defeated the champions of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang last year, and won the Triwizard Cup for Hogwarts. There is no better student in the whole school.
The witch went on and on about Ivan's achievements, and then speculated that the owl that brought him the letter might have been delayed because it couldn't find the place. This speculation seemed highly likely to Hermione, as Ivan's whereabouts during the summer holidays were so mysterious that she had to wait several days for an answer to her letters. Harry, George, and Fred nodded in agreement with Hermione's guess. Just as everyone was thinking this, a voice suddenly sounded. Puzzled, they turned to see that it was Ron who had spoken. He slowly put his hand into the pocket of his wizard robes and took out a crumpled letter and a gold and red badge.
Why do you have these letters, Ronnie boy? Did you send them both because the owl couldn't find Ivan? Why didn't you tell us earlier?
George asked curiously as he took both of them.
No, this letter is for me.
Ron stammered, his face flushed. George was taken aback, thinking that Ron was joking, but when he glanced at the letter in his hand, he was surprised to see Ron's name at the end.
Oh my God, how is this possible? Ronnie's going to be a prefect?
George exclaimed, his eyes widening as he held the envelope high in the light, as if to check its authenticity.
You've got to be kidding me, George.
Fred exclaimed as he snatched the letter out of George's hand.
Impossible. Professor McGonagall must be mistaken. Who in their right mind would choose Ron as prefect?
Harry and the others who were standing around also gathered around to read the letter. When the envelope reached Mrs. Weasley's hands, she let out a shriek of shock and joy, but when she looked at Ivan, her gaze was full of suspicion. With their hands free, George and Fred also looked at Ron strangely, as if he had just pulled a prank. Sirius stepped forward and tapped the letter with his wand. After examining it, he said,
This letter shows no signs of having been magically altered, so it can't be a hoax.
George muttered. Everyone in the room turned to look at him, and as they did so, Ron's face turned green and then white, and he muttered indignantly.
How should I know? It's probably.
I'm sure this is the right letter. You're going to be a prefect, Ron.
Yvonne said as she pushed George and the others aside.
Congratulations.
Ron didn't seem to get it for a moment, his face shifting as he said frantically.
But I mean.
In fact, he was quite surprised himself when he received the prefect's letter of appointment this morning, as Ivan seemed more suitable than he was.
Why should I blame you, Ron? I'm not a prefect and the professors haven't sent me any letters.
Ivan shrugged and smiled. He did not understand why Dumbledore chose Ron to be prefect of Gryffindor, but he believed it was a test of friendship and love.
You're amazing, Ron.
Arthur Weasley exclaimed as he gave him a big hug after Ivan congratulated him, realizing how much their questioning would hurt him. Shortly after, Lupin, Harry, Sirius, and the others came to their senses and congratulated him, while Mrs. Weasley happily hugged and kissed him. George and Fred were the only ones who insisted that the letter must have been sent to the wrong person, and that it could have been a practical joke on the part of Headmaster Dumbledore.
Come on, Mum, I'm not a child anymore.
So what's your reward? When Percy was a prefect, we gave him an owl, but you already have one, so you can choose something else.
Mrs. Weasley said happily as she released Ron.
Ray!
Ron couldn't believe his ears. As soon as he was sure he had heard correctly, he started thinking about it. A brand new gown, or a new rusty cauldron, or a new broom. Wine.
Ron, you can think about it at school. There's no time to lose. Get in the car.
At Arthur's prompting, Ivan and the others said their goodbyes and boarded the train with their suitcases. Just as they were looking for an empty carriage on the train, they saw 3 familiar figures walking towards them.
Hars!
Chapter 762. This must be Dumbledore's conspiracy.
Malfoy Goyle Crab.
Before Ivan could reply, Harry angrily stepped in front of Malfoy and questioned him. On the day of Lord Voldemort's return, Harry was wary of Malfoy and the other Death Eaters, as he had seen Lucius attempting to murder him in the graveyard. Ron, Hermione, and Ginny also pulled out their wands.
I'm not here for you.
Malfoy said haughtily, glancing at Harry, but his expression became troubled when he turned to Ivan. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped and said,
I'm just passing through, can't I? Move.
Malfoy took Goyle and Crabbe with him and pushed past them. Harry and Ron watched them closely, as if they were trying to find something wrong with Malfoy's actions and waved their wands to subdue them. Unfortunately, they did not find a reason to attack until the trio were out of sight. Ivan had a vague feeling that Malfoy was looking at him strangely, but he didn't care.
All right, forget about them. Let's find a carriage and sit down.
Seeing that the atmosphere was tense, Jenny quickly interrupted. Ivan nodded, and Harry and the others put away their wands and searched the compartment for seats before the train departed. Hermione and Ron did not join them, as they were new prefects and needed to report to the head of students. The prefects also had to take on the responsibility of patrolling the train to prevent the mischief makers from getting on the train. After listening to Hermione's account of the prefect's duties, Ivan was more than glad that he had not been chosen, or he would have wasted a lot of time on useless things this term. However, Ivan was troubled by the fact that many of the junior Gryffindor wizards took him to be their new prefect as they searched for an empty carriage.
Harry, Yvonne, come here, there's room.
Ginny called out to them happily as she opened the door to one of the carriages. Yvonne and Harry hurried over. As they were late, most of the carriages were either full or there was only one seat left. When Ivan reached the door, he found Luna in the carriage. The little witch, whom he had not seen for a long time, was leaning against the window with a long, thin wand in her ear and a large newspaper in her hand. She was reading it seriously. Some sunlight was shining down from the sky, illuminating her hair.
Hi, Ivan.
Luna turned her head slightly when she heard a noise at the door, and her face lit up when she saw Ivan.
It's been a while, Luna.
Ivan said with a smile, and then asked the witch to let Harry and Ginny carry their bags in. At the same time, the Hogwarts train, which had been docked for a long time, moved slowly. The people standing in the carriage swayed and hurriedly sat down after putting down their luggage.
What are you reading, Luna?
Ginny asked, looking curiously at the copy in the witch's hand. The headline was a moving picture, showing a large area of collapsed ruins and a burning house, shrouded in a strange black mist. The headline read,
Mysterious man fails and flips alley.
Ginny was immediately shocked, but when she read the rest of the article, she burst out laughing. It reported a riot in Knockturn Alley over a month ago. The newspaper's writers believed that the cause of the riot was the Death Eaters, led by you-know-who attacked Knockturn Alley and for some reason suffered a tragic defeat. And the one behind all of this is Dumbledore, who is behind a shocking plot to get rid of Minister for Magic Fudge.
This is very strange.
Malfoy Goyle Crab.
Luna, you'd better send a letter back to tell Mr. Novgood to keep an eye out for him. It would be best if he went into hiding. You know who will be very unhappy if he reads this.
Harry and Ginny turned their heads sharply, and Ivan was looking at them with a serious expression on his face. They were even more surprised when Luna gave Ivan's suggestion serious consideration and said in distress,
But where can we hide? Dad has to stay in England to work on his manuscript. He's not going to want to go too far.
If you have no other choice, you can move to Knockturn Alley for the time being.
Ivan suggested after a moment's thought. Voldemort would probably not have the courage to come to Knockturn Alley again until he knew more about himself. Furthermore, there were a large number of law enforcement officers patrolling the place, so his safety was guaranteed.
Turnover Alley. Isn't that where the dark wizards live? How could you let Luna's father move there?
Ginny shouted at Ivan. She remembered her mother telling her about the place, telling her not to go near Knockturn Alley, where it was said to be inhabited by the worst of the worst of the worst, the kind of people who would steal you if you were not careful. Such a place had nothing to do with security. Harry nodded in agreement, having wandered into Knockturn Alley once during the summer holidays of his first year. If Ivan had not arrived in time, he would have been taken away by an old witch. Every time he thought about it, he was terrified.
That was a few years ago, Ginny. In fact, the dark wizards have long since turned over a new leaf. They're all very willing to be good people.
Ivan assured her, looking at the two of them earnestly.
You'd be surprised how much it's changed if you had the time to visit it yourself.
Chapter 763, Secret Death. Dark wizards turning over a new leaf and trying to be good. Harry and Ginny looked at each other in disbelief. Ivan had no intention of explaining further. He couldn't very well say that the wicked dark wizards of Knockturn Alley had locked themselves up, and the remaining residents of Knockturn Alley had no choice but to be good people under the regulation, could they? It would be too frightening.
By the way, Harry, have you had any trouble lately? Or did Sirius and the others get wind that someone was planning to attack you?
Ivan asked, turning to Harry. He had noticed something amiss at the wizarding station, as the other members of the Order of the Phoenix were there to protect Harry. As Ivan searches his memory, he suddenly remembers that Harry was attacked by Dementors during the summer holidays and had to use the Puff's guard. Harry, however, shook his head and said,
No, I've had a good summer. Nobody's come after me. Sirius and the others insisted.
At this point, Harry looked awkward, as he did not like the feeling of being protected from everyone else, which made him think he was still in his first or second year. In particular, when he suggested joining the Order of the Phoenix to fight the Death Eaters this summer, Mrs. Weasley and the members of the Order of the Phoenix firmly refused him, citing his young age.
So you know who didn't send anyone to attack you?
Ivan muttered, more or less surprised. This was very different from the plot in his memory, and the more the plot changed, the more distorted the information he now had, possibly misleading him. For example, he followed the plot last term and used it as a clue to investigate, only to find out that both Moody and Crouch Jr. were just cover for Lord Voldemort to get his attention. These precedents immediately put Ivan on his guard, and he asked sternly,
If you're not in trouble, why are Sirius and the others guarding you so closely?
It was Professor Dumbledore's idea, and his last order was for Dad and the others to protect Harry.
Ginny said before Harry could reply.
Dumbledore's?
Asked Ivan, acutely aware that something was amiss. Ginny nodded and quickly explained to Ivan that the family had moved to a safe house for the summer, and that members of the Order of the Phoenix often came to the meetings. The exception was Professor Dumbledore, who was nowhere to be seen for 2 months, as all of his instructions were delivered via Snape. If not for the occasional letter from Fawkes the Phoenix, they would have suspected that Snape was behind Dumbledore's downfall. Sirius almost got into a fight with Snape over this speculation. Ivan frowned at this, his suspicion growing. Lord Voldemort had only been revived 2 months ago, so it was reasonable to assume that Dumbledore would take some time out this summer to discuss strategies with the Order's core members. Could it be?
Don't worry, now that Hermione and I are prefects, it won't be easy for Malfoy to come after us.
Ron said confidently.
You shouldn't abuse your position, Ron.
Chapter 764, The Welcoming Feast. Shortly after, the swaying carriage drew to a halt beside the stone steps of the oak front door, and Ivan stepped out to follow the flow of people into the castle. Harry, who was in the back, kept looking back with a worried expression.
What is it, Harry?
Yvonne asked, noticing his odd behavior.
Did you see Hagrid? He used to come and greet new students.
Harry said, surprised.
His classes were terrible last year. Maybe he was fired by Headmaster Dumbledore because of the number of complaints. I saw Professor Grubblyplank at the station earlier. She's probably taking over.
Luna suggested.
That's impossible.
Harry exclaimed, glaring at Luna. Professor Dumbledore would never fire Hagrid. And he thought Hagrid's lessons were good, even though everyone seemed to like him.
So you're planning on keeping a few more this term?
Luna asked airily. Harry's words were stuck in his throat, his face twisting with uncertainty as he thought of the terrible things that had happened to them when Hagrid had told them to raise blast-ended scroots, and how they had been chased by a pack of them.
Umbridge, there she is,
muttered Ivan, narrowing his eyes. Hermione followed Ivan's gaze and caught sight of the loathsome figure. However, she was even more surprised when another person, Professor Grubblyplank, took Hagrid's place at the end of the table. Noting this, Harry and the others gasped, fearing for Hagrid's safety.
See, it's just as I thought.
Luna said, shaking her head. Harry, Hermione, and Ron scowled at her. Yvonne agreed that Luna was being too blunt, but did not try to stop her. Strictly speaking, Luna did not say anything wrong, except that it was inappropriate. This was because Hagrid's teaching skills were terrible, and he was fond of bringing in large, ferocious-looking cuddles to his classes and trying to make everyone love them. As for Hagrid's whereabouts, Ivan believes he must have followed Dumbledore's orders to negotiate with the giants. After all, Hagrid is not Harry, and is not worth being targeted by Lord Voldemort or the Death Eaters.
I was wearing a new hat a long time ago, before Hogwarts was built, and the 4 founders of the noble school thought they would never part ways.
Chapter 765, Umbridge 4, Umbridge. Umbridge's eyes lit up at the sight of Dumbledore entering the classroom, and she became so excited that she stood up to greet him. Umbridge cleared her throat and said in a strange voice,
Headmaster Dumbledore, I need to remind you that Hogwarts rules state that the headmaster should be present before the sorting.
Dumbledore, however, did not seem to see her and did not seem to have any intention of stopping. Instead, he simply walked past Umbridge, and the pressure he was giving off silenced her. Umbridge stood there with her mouth open and her face turning purple. Dumbledore stepped onto the stage, looked down at the young wizards and said with a smile,
I'm late, but I must say.
As soon as he finished speaking, the hall erupted in applause. When Dumbledore was not present at the welcoming ceremony, the senior students were alarmed, but now they were relieved. When the applause died down a little, Dumbledore continued.
Perhaps the long journey has made you hungry, but I would like to say a few words before we begin our feast. This year, there have been 2 changes to our teaching staff. First, I'm very pleased to have Professor Grubblyplank back in charge of the care of magical creatures class.
As he spoke, Dumbledore turned his attention to the teacher's table, and Professor Grubblyplank stood up and smiled at the crowd, prompting another round of applause. Harry wanted to ask where Hagrid was, but Hermione stopped him. Dumbledore then turned to Umbridge, who was still standing in the aisle of the long table.
In addition, there is a new face this year, with Umbridge teaching defense against the dark arts.
Umbridge cleared her throat, interrupting Dumbledore with a grimace and a fake smile.
Thank you, Headmaster, but I would prefer to introduce myself.
Dumbledore remained silent, seemingly acquiescing to Umbridge's claims. Umbridge managed to regain some of her self-confidence and managed to put on her trademark sweet smile.
I must say, it's wonderful to be back at Hogwarts again. Just looking at you reminds me of my old school days. I stood here more than 40 years ago, wearing my sorting hat and becoming a Hogwarts student with a heart full of excitement and joy.
Umbridge talked about her youth, trying to get closer to the wizards but to little avail. Nobody wanted to know how she managed to rise to the position of head of house more than 40 years ago through hard work and snitching, nor did they have much interest in old rules and regulations. The audience drifted off to sleep, and Harry lay on his bed with his hands over his stomach, wondering when he would be able to enjoy his dinner.
Can it wait until after dinner?
Ron muttered to himself with a sigh. In the past, he had always started the feast first and then spoken, but for some reason this school year was different. Umbridge went on for over 40 minutes. In the first half, she relived the glory she had achieved as a student, and in the second half, she stressed that Hogwarts would be subject to changes under the supervision of the Ministry of Magic, as well as improving existing school rules.
Thank you very much, Professor Umbridge, for your very illuminating speech.
Dumbledore said, waiting for Umbridge to finish before returning to the stage. As for now, you may enjoy your dinner. Dumbledore raised his left hand and waved his wand, and chunks of beef, pies, platters of vegetables, bread, jam, and pots of pumpkin juice appeared on the tables of the four houses. The young wizards, who had been starving all night, perked up and dug into their knives and forks. Ivan also cut a small piece of steak and stuffed it into his mouth. Harry and Ron eat while discussing the new defense against the dark arts professor. They had met Umbridge several times before, so they had little hope for this year's defense against the dark arts class, and only hoped that Umbridge would not do any worse than Lockhart.
I'm afraid there's more to this than meets the eye.
Hermione put down her knife and fork for a moment and looked at the two of them solemnly.
Did she say anything? It all sounded like nonsense, and I was falling asleep.
Ron yawned and gulped down a mouthful of iced lemon juice.
Sometimes there's something important in nonsense.
Hermione said earnestly, but both Harry and Ron looked blank. Hermione sighed and explained.
The fact that Umbridge is here means that the Ministry of Magic is trying to interfere with Hogwarts and undermine Professor Dumbledore's influence at Hogwarts. You've probably seen the Daily Prophet for the past 2 months, and that's an omen.
Harry and Ron were furious when Hermione mentioned the reports. Over the course of the past 2 months, the Daily Prophet has been extremely abusive to Dumbledore, denying the return of Lord Voldemort on a daily basis, and using a dozen articles to prove that Dumbledore suffered from Alzheimer's disease. One article mentioned Dumbledore's habit of saying crazy things during the welcoming ceremony, such as the famous line,
Dumbass sobbing nose, scum squeeze.
Chapter 798, 798 Sometimes the truth is in the hands of a few, 2 years ago. Chapter 766, Sometimes the truth is in the hands of a few. Ephraim poured through Hermione's Daily Prophet, which described Dumbledore as an elderly, willful child. The last report said so. He is too old to be expected to keep his wits about him at all times, and it is extremely dangerous to keep such a half-witted man on as headmaster of Hogwarts. For the sake of the next generation, the best thing we can do is to keep this once legendary wizard at home recuperating.
Well, it's interesting when you read a storybook.
Ivan commented as he put the paper down.
This isn't the time for jokes, Ivan. There are lots of stories about you in there, too.
Hermione scowled at him.
Yeah, did I?
Yvonne opened the paper again. Following Hermione's directions, Ivan soon found news about himself on another page of the Daily Prophet. Not much was said about him, as he was described as an arrogant, eccentric genius who, in an attempt to steal the show, managed to fool Dumbledore and, along with Harry, created the story of the resurrection of the mysterious man. There was even a report suggesting that he was from Knockoff Alley, and that he had formed a gang in order to become the next mystery man.
That's...
Ivan said, his mouth twitching. Needless to say, the Ministry of Magic must have put pressure on the Daily Prophet, or the editor who wrote the article would never have had the nerve to make it up. Dumbledore was the only one with a good attitude. If it had been Voldemort, the entire newspaper would have been slaughtered. Ivan felt a headache coming on as he thought about it. He had only seen the news as a joke, but over time, some wizards might actually believe it. Crucially, Ivan could not think of a solution for a while. He might have information on Rita Skeeter, but she was just an editor for the Daily Prophet and could not decide much. Even if she was willing to write articles that were good for her, she would not pass the review. Negotiations were even more out of the question. The last time he disguised himself as Dumbledore to run for Minister for Magic, he stood them up, angering the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet.
There were so many witnesses to Voldemort's return. How could they?
Harry bit into a piece of pastry as though it were fudge.
As we are all under Professor Dumbledore's command, and may have spoken at his behest, we cannot be used as evidence for Minister Fudge's claim.
Hermione continued, taking out a thick book.
And Minister Fudge had no choice but to believe that you-know-who was dead, or his position as Minister for Magic would have been over.
Ivan looked at Hermione's copy of the little clerk to the Minister for Magic. How a wizard ascends to the top of power with mixed feelings. He had given it to Hermione on the spur of the moment, but he hadn't expected her to actually read it. As Hermione put it, Fudge did not completely disbelieve in Lord Voldemort's return, but rather because the circumstances did not allow him to. After all, Fudge had won the support of many when he chose to side with the Conservatives, and now he had to go all the way, or he would be repudiating everything he had done, which would undermine Fudge's rule. If his past misdeeds were exposed, the angry wizards would immediately throw him out of office, and his reputation might even be ruined. For a politician like Fudge, his own interests came first. If he could not become minister, then what good would the wizarding world do him? Therefore, despite the Dementor's riot and Pettigrew's escape, Fudge preferred to believe that Dumbledore, his political enemy, was behind it all. After dinner, Dumbledore rose and dismissed the entire school, and the sound of crashing tables and chairs could be heard.
I'm going to give directions to the first years. You can go back.
Hermione said, gathering the Gryffindor students with her books. Ron fidgeted with his prefect badge and took a few deep breaths, looking nervous. After greeting them, Ivan took Harry back to the Gryffindor common room. When she opened the door to her room, Seamus and Neville were already there, chatting. Neville was delighted to see them.
Harry, Ivan, you're just in time. We were just talking about you. About what?
Harry asked curiously.
Harry, where were you the night you received your prize last term?
Seamus hesitated.
Didn't I tell you? Peter Pettigrew used Polyjuice Potion to disguise himself as Sirius and brought me to Lord Voldemort, and then Ivan and the others rescued me.
Harry said impatiently, before realizing what was happening.
Wait!
Seamus said sheepishly as he looked at Ivan, then continued dejectedly.
But my mother thought Professor Dumbledore was mentally unstable. She didn't believe you-know-who was still alive and thought you were lying.
Harry quavered. After Lord Voldemort's return, the Ministry of Magic and the Daily Prophet did nothing but stir up trouble, and Dumbledore was the only one to step forward and reveal the truth.
All right, stop arguing.
Ivan said, interrupting the argument. He looked at Seamus and said,
You're 15 years old, Seamus. You should be able to judge for yourself. You were there when the riot broke out on the day of the game. Think about it. Don't forget, no one wanted to believe you in your first year, even if it was true.
Said Ivan, patting Seamus on the shoulder.
So I'm right. Did you really fly through the Forbidden Forest on a dragon that day?
Seamus's face was bright red. He had told this story to a lot of people, but they treated it like a joke.
How else do you think I beat off Professor Chino?
Ivan asked with a shrug and a smile.
Sometimes the truth is in the hands of a few.
Chapter 767, The Book of Hieroglyphs 2 in 4000.
I can't believe you kept this from me for so long.
Seamus exclaimed.
Tell me what happened that day. Tomorrow, I'll tell you tomorrow, or you can go to Harry and Ron, they know.
Seeing Seamus's excitement, Ivan shook his head. He should not have said so. He had important things to do tonight. Because of the previous conflict, Seamus was too ashamed to confront Harry again, so he pestered Ivan relentlessly. Ron, who had finished guiding the new students, came through the door and saved Yvonne. After all, Ron was a great storyteller.
I solemnly swear I did no good.
Ivan tapped his wand, and fine lines of ink appeared on the blank parchment, gradually outlining the castle.
Yes, Dumbledore's in the office.
Ivan searched the Marauder's map and quickly located Dumbledore. He immediately jumped out of bed and went to the headmaster's office to ask about the location of the Hogwarts mana storage room. The lack of magic was his greatest weakness at the moment. If he could solve it, he would no longer have to hide when he saw Voldemort again. He could rely on his bloodline magic to fight him head-on.
Gone out in the middle of the night. What's so urgent?
Yvonne raised her eyebrows, wondering. During the welcoming ceremony, Dumbledore was unusually late, and he did not stop for a moment after the feast, as if he was rushing to do something. This did not sit well with Ivan, and Dumbledore seemed a little too well for his liking. If not for the fact that the other party was still using his left hand when casting the spell, and that he had seen Dumbledore's name on the Marauder's map, he would have suspected that it was Dumbledore himself.
Forget it, I'll ask him tomorrow. A day or two won't make a difference.
Ivan held the Marauder's map for a long time, but Dumbledore did not return, so she gave up on the idea of asking about the magical storage room for the time being, and instead took out the 2 books given to her by Nicholas Flamel.
What does it say, Hermione?
Yvonne asked, stepping forward curiously.
Take a look for yourself.
Hermione said, holding out the parchment. At first, Ivan thought Umbridge was up to something, but when he looked at it, he realized that it was an advertisement for Weasley's Joke Shop, advertising their new product this year, and openly recruiting experimenters and employees at the end.
The skiving snack boxes, the quibbler, the decoy bomb, and even the portable marshes.
Trembling with anger, Hermione thought that George and Fred must have thought they would go easy on Ron and her prefects this year, so they stuck the advertisement on the notice board in the lounge.
God, Hermione, don't tell me you want to be the next Percy, that's horrible.
Ron didn't think it was such a big deal to put up an advertisement, but was shocked by Hermione's words. He thought about Hermione's haughty manner of commanding people around with a copy of how a prefect gets power all day long.
Of course, I don't want to be Percy.
Hermione snapped, rolling her eyes.
But they should know that 5th years have to take their OWL exams this year, and 7th years have to take their NEWT certificates. They don't have time for fun. You'll help me, won't you, Yvonne?
Hermione begged, turning to Yvonne, knowing full well that she could not hold back George and Fred.
Okay, I'll talk to them sometime and get them to tone it down a bit.
Ivan nodded in agreement. This was because he saw a love potion called Magical Witch in the list of products. Selling this mind-altering potion was a little too much and could easily cause trouble. Not to mention the fact that Umbridge was preparing to go all out to clean up Hogwarts this year, and it would not be a good time to get too jumpy.
A little restraint.
Hermione pursed her lips unhappily.
Well, don't worry about it so much. Let's get to dinner.
Chapter 767 Part 2, The Book of Hieroglyphs 2 in 4000. Hermione's face turned bright red, and she forgot all about trying to get George and Fred into trouble, even though it wasn't the first time Ivan had kissed her. They entered the entrance hall together. The students they met along the way were polarized. Some greeted them warmly, while the rest stayed away as if they were the plague. Ivan, of course, knew exactly what was going on. The young witches and wizards who were avoiding him must have believed the Daily Prophet's claims, or perhaps they had been ordered by their families to stay away from him during the summer holidays. Those who still believed in him were probably his adoring admirers. Harry was also keenly aware of the avoidance of others and was immediately discouraged, unable to understand why so many people would want to believe in the ministry's nonsense.
Because of the power of public opinion, of course.
Ivan explained.
Muggle-like governments are authoritative in their own right, and most people would choose to believe anything they say if it wasn't too outrageous, and with the Daily Prophet's information bombing, even more people do.
Ivan was well aware of how easy it was for the authorities to manipulate public opinion and distort the truth. If even a bag of washing powder could be claimed to be a biological weapon, Voldemort's life or death would be up to them.
Yes, those wizards can only see what the ministry wants them to see, and if only there were another influential newspaper willing to report the truth.
Hermione, having recovered from her earlier embarrassment, began to speak, then paused and said regretfully.
Even Lavender believed the words of the Daily Prophet.
Don't worry, I'll convince her. It'll only take a few moments.
Ron promised, thumping his chest. His relationship with Lavender had improved by leaps and bounds since the dance last year, and they had become a couple within a few days. As they chatted, Ivan and the others sat down at the Gryffindor table and enjoyed their breakfast. Professor Binns, a ghost, was his usual self. He didn't seem to care much about class order as he went through the entire lesson word for word. The boring history of magic made the audience drowsy, and Hermione was the only one who took notes. Even before the lesson began, Ivan chose a secluded spot and began leafing through the Book of Hieroglyphs. Since he had nothing better to do the night before, he skimmed through the 2 books that Nicholas Flamel had given him. The other, the Book of Abraham in Judea, contained a great deal of advanced alchemical knowledge, and even the method of making a philosopher's stone was unearthed by Nicholas Flamel. However, the entire text was written in a mixture of Latin, Arabic, Chaldean, and Old Syriac, so he could not understand it without a translation. Ivan also believed that the Book of Hieroglyphs would help him most quickly. These were, after all, Nicholas Flamel's research notes, and the knowledge was all collated and concise. In addition, there were hundreds of different magical runes and thousands of ways to arrange them, as well as ways to use the Philosopher's Stone.
I knew it. Last summer, my teacher was researching something related to the Philosopher's Stone.
Ivan muttered to himself as he reached a certain page. The page depicted an eccentric armguard-like device with a central recess in which was mounted a bright red, irregular stone. He had seen the same thing on a research drawing by Nicholas Flamel a year earlier. After reading the contents of the book, Ivan soon learned the purpose of the device. Generally speaking, one would have to set up an alchemy array in order to use the large amount of magic contained within the stone. It would be somewhat inconvenient in battle, as the enemy would not give you time to prepare. This was why the armguard that Nicholas Flamel had developed was so important. It was akin to a magic guiding device, capable of extracting the magic stored within a philosopher's stone and using it to cast spells. This is probably the trick that Nicholas Flamel used to gain an abundance of magic in battle. Seeing this, Ivan understood that he had one more task to do this year, and that was to create this alchemical device. During the next lesson, Ivan found the method of converting substances using an alchemy array in the Book of Hieroglyphs, as well as the recipe for the elixir of life.
I guess I'll have to be more careful in the future. GPA is very important when it comes to improving my academic efficiency.
The next lesson was potions, and nobody wanted to be late for Snape's class, and Ivan was no exception, so he quickly gathered his textbooks and left the classroom.
Ivan, why were you so distracted in class today?
Hermione asked, catching up with him. Today, when Professor Binns asked her a question, Yvonne did not argue, much to Hermione's discomfort.
I'm just working on a very important alchemy subject, and I'm getting a little carried away.